Chapter 487. Spiritual Aura Explosion. Upon seeing this scene, Qin Shi muttered in a low voice. Although it wasn't a real spiritual aura explosion, the principle was the same. The vermilion bird bow was a psychic magic weapon, and was born with spirituality. If one wanted to pick it up, they had to get its approval. There was a strong vermilion bird's breath on the vermilion bird bow. So if one wanted to tame it, they had to bear this kind of divine power first. With so much vermilion bird's breath pouring into Ling Yunhe's body, if he couldn't bear it, the result would be the same as spiritual aura explosion. Master Taoist Yuanmu rushed forward, followed by Master Taoist Iron Mask. The three of them watched nervously. Could Ling Yunhe bear this kind of power? Would he tame the vermilion bird bow? Or would he be torn apart by the vermilion bird's breath? Logically speaking, as a core formation cultivator, his body shouldn't be able to bear this kind of power. However, he cultivated the ice and fire arts specially prepared for the vermilion bird bow by the ancient Great Ice Palace. Who knew if there was something special about this technique that could dissolve the power of the vermilion bird's breath? As the vermilion bird's breath poured in, the icy mist around Ling Yunhe's body became thinner and thinner, and was gradually swallowed by the flames. The expression on his face became more and more painful, and his whole body slowly turned red, as if he had become a red-hot soldering iron. Even the flow of the spiritual aura in his meridians could be seen clearly. Seeing that Ling Yunhe's meridians had almost reached their limit, and the divine power from the vermilion bird bow was still pouring in, Master Taoist Yuanmu clenched his teeth and hit the middle of Ling Yunhe's back with his palm. If he let things continue like this, Ling Yunhe probably wouldn't be able to escape the fate of exploding and dying. Since the vermilion bird's breath had already started pouring in, it couldn't be stopped. Therefore, Master Taoist Yuanmu thought of this method to let the extra vermilion bird's breath out of Ling Yunhe's body through another exit. This exit was himself. With Master Taoist Yuanmu sharing the burden, Ling Yunhe's pain was slightly alleviated. However, even Master Taoist Yuanmu didn't feel relaxed when facing the vermilion bird's breath. In the distant past, spiritual magic weapons like the vermilion bird bow could only be controlled by high-level cultivators. The high-level cultivators in the distant past were not the nascent soul realm of today, but the body integration realm, or even the Mahayana realm. Compared to a body integration stage cultivator, a nascent soul cultivator was nothing more than an insignificant junior. So how could they withstand the power of the vermilion bird's aura? If it wasn't for the cloud-soaring crane acting as a buffer, he would have directly gone to take it himself. His ending would have been no different from Jing Xingji and Qin Shi's. Gradually, spiritual master Yuanmu's face flushed red. His meridians and dantian could no longer withstand such intense vermilion bird divine power. Seeing this, the Iron Mask spiritual master also came forward. Senior brother. Perfected Yuanmu gritted his teeth. Conserve your strength. Beneath the black iron mask, Master Taoist Iron Mask's eyes flashed. He paused for a moment, but in the next second, he suddenly reached out to grab Emotienga. With a sharp whistle, the three-yong real fire sword flew out. Qin Shi stood in front of her and shouted, "What do you want to do?" Master Taoist Iron Face's reaction was extremely fast. Since his attack missed, a light flashed in his hand and a long, jet-black whip appeared in his hand. With a flick of his hand, it once again lashed towards Emotienga. Qin Shi was furious. Just now, Master Taoist Yuanmu made a heart demon oath, so they believed him. However, he didn't expect that Master Taoist Iron Mask, who had been silent like a shadow, would suddenly attack them. If it was just Master Taoist Iron Mask alone, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji wouldn't be afraid. However, Master Taoist Iron Mask was an old monster who had lived for almost 2,000 years. He had rich experience in fights of magical powers, and his methods were shrewd and ruthless. His sudden attack caught Qin Shi off guard. Qin Shi had no choice but to change the three-yong real fire sword formation into a huge sword which chopped down at Master Taoist Iron Mask, blocking the momentum of the long whip. Fortunately, Jing Xingji's flying sword also arrived. His reaction wasn't slow, but he was a little far away. Seeing that his attack was resolved by Qin Shi, and that Jing Xingji's flying sword was behind him, Master Taoist Iron Mask didn't move. He just shook his sleeves and released his spiritual aura. A huge shield suddenly appeared behind him, protecting him. Then, he forcibly withstood Jing Xingji's flying sword attack, and still attacked Mo Tiange unyieldingly. Qin Shi didn't understand what he wanted to do, but his opponent's behavior had already angered him. Master Taoist Iron Mask used Invisible Sword. The golden sword aura was surrounded by the 3 Yang Real Fire. Then 1 turned into 2, 2 turned into 4, and in an instant, it turned into hundreds of sword auras which pierced towards Master Taoist Iron Mask. This time, Master Taoist Iron Mask finally couldn't take it head-on. Although his cultivation level was high, and he was also rich in experience, his strength wasn't at the top among late-stage nascent soul cultivators. Under Jing Xingji's attack, he couldn't hold on for too long. After all, the attack power of a sword cultivator wasn't something ordinary cultivators could compare to. Facing Qin Shi's attack, he chose to retreat. Master Taoist Iron Mask's gaze shifted, but he didn't say anything. Qin Shoujing, why are you being so polite with him? Jing Xingji said coldly as he stepped forward with a flying sword in his hand. No matter what he wants to do, since he's already made his move, why don't we take this opportunity to kill him? We can't defeat 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators. But do we have to be afraid of one? Jing Xingji was a typical sword cultivator. He was the best at seizing opportunities to kill with 1 strike. Right now, Master Taoist Yuanmu couldn't move, and only Master Taoist Iron Mask was left. If the 2 of them worked together, their chances of killing him would be very high. At that time, even if Master Taoist Yuanmu escaped, he wouldn't be able to do anything to them, and they wouldn't have to compromise for their lives. But Qin Shi wasn't as ruthless as him. They'd clearly agreed before, and they didn't take advantage of him. So why did Master Taoist Iron Mask suddenly attack them? Moreover, his target was Mo Tiange, which was too strange. Master Taoist Iron Mask half-turned his body and said in a deep hoarse voice, "Humph, it's not that easy to kill me." He'd been trapped in the nascent soul realm for so many years, so how could he not have 1 or 2 life-saving secret techniques? Besides, they could kill his body, but could they kill his nascent soul? Even if he was besieged by 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, his nascent soul wasn't that easy to kill. However, his lifespan was almost up, so even if his nascent soul escaped, it would be meaningless. Thinking up to this point, the pair of eyes exposed under the black iron mask became gloomy, and he looked regretfully at Master Taoist Yuanmu and Ling Yunhe. He'd lived for nearly 2,000 years, and his lifespan was almost up. The remaining 100 or so years weren't enough for him to cultivate to the peak stage of the late stage. Even if he obtained the fated chance of the deification realm, he wouldn't have a chance to advance to the deification realm. This trip to the Sea of Returning Ruins was originally his last chance to do something for the sect. Even if he died here, it would be worth it. However, the current situation caused him to feel a sense of despair. This junior martial brother Yuanmu was much younger than him. Back then, he was already a nascent soul cultivator, while this junior martial brother was just a beginner. In just a few hundred years, he had already become a great late-stage nascent soul cultivator, who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. With nearly 1,000 years of lifespan left, this talented junior martial brother was very likely to advance to the deification realm. In addition, this brat who cultivated the ice and fire arts would go to the underground palace to get the vermilion bird bow. This was the purpose of their trip. Junior martial brother Yuanmu would obtain the fated chance of the deification realm, and that brat from Ling family would take the vermilion bird bow. The hateful thing was that it seemed very difficult to achieve now. If they couldn't resolve the vermilion bird's breath, the two of them might die here together. Deification realm? Vermilion bird bow. Everything would become a bubble. He sighed, not for his own meaningless sacrifice, but for the foundation of Juyan's sect. But what happened next stunned him. This is senior martial brother. Mo Tiange also shouted. Qin Shi was slightly startled. He suddenly felt something was wrong. He lowered his head and widened his eyes in shock. In order to threaten Master Taoist Iron Mask, he stood very close to Ling Yunhe. At that moment, The vermilion bird's breath on Ling Yunhe and Master Taoist Yuanmu's bodies was overflowing. Their meridians and dantians couldn't contain it anymore. Without an exit, the vermilion bird's breath that was stuck on Ling Yunhe and Master Taoist Yuanmu's bodies actually spread out and turned into flames, wrapping around his body. Sharp pain. This was his first feeling. It wasn't that he hadn't been injured before. In the 100 years he was in the core formation realm, he'd suffered countless injuries, big and small. Among them, there were even a few that caused his cultivation level to plummet, and he almost lost his life. However, none of them made him feel this kind of sharp pain, as if even his soul was being burned. This was the power of the vermilion bird's breath, the vermilion bird's divine power. He suddenly understood Master Taoist Iron Mask's action just now. He wanted to grab Emotienga and let Ling Yunhe transfer the remaining vermilion bird's breath to her body, so he could use her as an exit. Unfortunately, his attack didn't hit. He failed. But inadvertently, he created such an exit. What should I do? He tried to break free, but this vermilion bird's breath firmly entangled him, making him unable to move even half an inch. He felt his meridians rapidly being occupied by the heat, then rushing into his dantian. But he was powerless to do anything. Hearing a familiar shout, he looked towards Emotienga. He saw her rushing towards him, but he couldn't even lift his hand. He only had enough time to look at Jing Xingji. Stop her, he silently said. Chapter 488. Seeing your martial brother. Don't go over there. Jing Xingji's figure flashed and stopped in front of Emotienga, shouting fiercely. Emotienga didn't even look at him. Jing Xingji helplessly grabbed her arm and spiritual aura gushed out from his palm. Under the fierce sword intent of a nascent soul sword cultivator, Emotienga couldn't move and could only watch helplessly. She was completely engulfed by the vermilion bird's breath. His whole body was surrounded by red mist, but the vermilion bird's breath still spread out from the cloud-soaring crane's body and rushed towards him. You can't solve anything if you go over there, Jing Xingji said calmly. This vermilion bird's breath is so overbearing. You're only in the core formation realm. If Qin Shoujing can't stand it, you'll only die if you go. Emotienga couldn't hear what he said. She just watched Qin Shi being surrounded by the vermilion bird's breath, and her heart suddenly felt empty. She could only hope that the divine power on the vermilion bird bow would be exhausted before he couldn't stand it anymore. As for who the vermilion bird bow belonged to, she didn't care. She didn't care if it helped someone else. It was enough as long as he could keep his life. However, the vermilion bird's breath seemed endless. It kept pouring into the cloud-soaring crane's meridians, then flowed out of the cloud-soaring crane's body and wrapped around Qin Shi. The red mist on Qin Shi's body became thicker and thicker. In the end, he seemed to be bathed in blood, and his figure couldn't be seen clearly. Seeing this scene, Master Iron Mask was both happy and worried. He originally wanted to catch someone to share the pressure of the vermilion bird's breath, but Qin Shi and Jing Xingji were nascent soul cultivators, so he had to attack Emotienga, who had the lowest cultivation level. He didn't expect that the vermilion bird's breath would find Qin Shi. He was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so he could bear much more divine power than Emotienga. Maybe he alone would be enough. However, this vermilion bird's breath was so strong. Seeing that Qin Shi's body was already covered with it, and showed no signs of stopping, Master Iron Mask couldn't help but worry. If Qin Shi wasn't enough, what should he do? His original plan was to risk his life to share the burden of the vermilion bird's divine power. But they had already fought just now. With that sword cultivator's vicious and merciless personality, he would most likely take advantage of the situation and lose his life in vain. With this thought, Iron Mask didn't know what to do and could only watch helplessly. Boom! The blood mist became extremely thick. All of a sudden, a loud explosion rang out from Qin Shi's body. The blood mist unexpectedly turned into flames, burning fiercely. Emotienga turned pale with fright. What kind of situation is this? The flame formed by the vermilion bird's breath contained the vermilion bird's divine power. Even Qin Shi's extreme young real fire was extremely afraid of it. If it directly burned his body, would he still be alive? To the side, Jing Xingji exclaimed softly in surprise. He muttered to himself, "This is too strange." At this very moment, Ling Yunha's hand was gripping the vermilion bird bough. The breath of the vermilion bird entered his meridians through his palm, and then flowed into Reverend Yuanmu's body. Nevertheless, Master Taoist Yuanmu's whole body was red, and his meridians and dantian were filled with vermilion bird's breath. Qin Shi's situation was different from theirs. First, he hadn't come into contact with Ling Yunha before, so it could be said that the vermilion bird's breath took the initiative to find him. Second, the vermilion bird's breath on his body was in the form of a red mist, unlike the other two's, which directly entered his meridians. Third, the other two didn't have flames on their bodies, but Qin Shi's eventually turned into flames. In just a short while, the flames had completely surrounded Qin Shi. Aside from a hazy shadow, nothing else could be seen. Just when the others thought he was going to be burned to ashes by the flames, a hazy white light suddenly appeared in his dantian. At first, this white light was only a tiny dot hidden in the flames. It was so faint that it seemed like an illusion, but gradually, the white light became brighter and bigger. In the end, it even competed with the vermilion bird's flames. Boom! Another dull sound rang out. The vermilion bird's breath seemed to crazily rush towards Qin Shi. From the vermilion bird bough, from Ling Yunha, and even from Master Taoist Yuanmu, these vermilion birds' breaths flowed into Qin Shi's body, turning into flames and rushing towards that white light. This is... Jing Xingji and Master Taoist Iron Mask were both dumbfounded. What kind of situation was this? Mo Tiange was stunned, but she suddenly thought of something. She was overjoyed. Young spiritual bead. She almost forgot that Qin Shi had a young spiritual bead on him. Lord Taoist Jinghe said young spiritual beads were strange objects born in spirit veins. They specialized in swallowing the young spiritual aura in spirit veins. Over time, they swallowed all the young spiritual aura in the spirit veins and produced young spiritual beads. According to this, young spiritual beads contained inexhaustible spiritual aura. If they were completely released, even a deification cultivator's body would easily explode from the spiritual aura. Because a young spiritual bead could produce young spiritual beads, it was impossible for a deification cultivator to have more spiritual aura than a spirit vein. Since a young spiritual bead could contain so much spiritual aura, could it also contain the divine power brought by the vermilion bird's breath? When she thought of this, Mo Tiange felt like she had been rescued from a desperate situation. Hope once again emerged in her heart. Young spiritual bead? Jing Xingji frowned slightly in confusion. Although Qin Shi was with him when he obtained the young spiritual bead, Jing Xingji didn't know what kind of young spiritual bead that unremarkable bead was. If he knew, he would definitely regret it so much that his intestines would turn green. Back then he simply didn't care about that bead. When they were dividing the spoils of war, he casually threw it to Qin Shi. It was precisely because of this young spiritual bead that Qin Shi cultivated faster than him, had more fated chances than him, and even obtained a top-notch cultivation technique, the pure young technique, from a deification cultivator. It even led to the marriage between Qin Shi and Mo Tiange. Fortunately, he didn't know that sometimes, ignorance was also a kind of happiness. The white light became brighter and brighter, and the speed at which the vermilion bird's breath rushed towards Qin Shi also became faster and faster. Master Taoist Iron Mask's expression became a bit strange. His intuition told him that something was wrong. The young spiritual bead shone brightly, but the vermilion bird bough's light became dimmer and dimmer. The vermilion bird's breath on Ling Yunha and Master Taoist Yuanmu also became lesser and lesser. All of this vermilion bird's breath rushed towards Qin Shi. After a long time, maybe a quarter of an hour, maybe even shorter, the flames on the vermilion bird bough finally swayed, dimmed, and finally disappeared. Without the vermilion bird's breath, it only looked like a simple and exquisite weapon. The vermilion bird's breath on Ling Yunha and Master Taoist Yuanmu also completely disappeared. Without the support of the vermilion bird's divine power, the two of them suddenly collapsed to the ground. Master Taoist Iron Mask was stunned for a moment. He then rushed forward to check Ling Yunha and Master Taoist Yuanmu's situation. After checking their pulse, Master Taoist Iron Mask was dumbfounded. After a while, he sat paralyzed on the ground. Their meridians and dantians were forcibly rushed by the vermilion bird's breath. Although their meridians weren't broken, they were more or less damaged. Ling Yunhe was in a slightly better condition. He cultivated the ice and fire arts, so the fire spiritual aura in it was compatible with the vermilion bird's breath. It was just that his meridians were forcibly widened and were slightly damaged. Master Taoist Yuanmu, on the other hand, had his meridians broken, and he almost had no spiritual aura left. This vermilion bird bow was, after all, an ancient spirit-seeking magic weapon. Even though Master Taoist Yuanmu was already a great cultivator in the late nascent soul stage, he still couldn't bear such a powerful vermilion bird's divine power. What made Master Taoist Iron Mask so pale was actually the vermilion bird bow on the offering table. Without the vermilion bird's breath, it would also lose the vermilion bird's divine power. Would it still be a spirit-connecting magic weapon? Besides, Ling Yunhe had already fainted, but the vermilion bird bow was still sitting on the offering table. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like the vermilion bird bow had already been subdued. He couldn't help but think, could it be that the ancestors' dying wish and the efforts of Juyan sect's 100,000 years and more than 100 generations were simply an illusion? Was their guess wrong, or was Ling Yunhe's cultivation level not high enough? The flames on Qinshi's body also slowly dimmed. When the last flame disappeared, the vermilion bird bow on the offering table swayed a bit then flew towards him. Along with the flames, it entered his body. Because the yang spiritual bead absorbed the vermilion bird's breath, its color was no longer pure white but light red. After it completely swallowed the vermilion bird's breath, the yang spiritual bead flashed for a moment, before its light also slowly dimmed, and eventually disappeared. As for Qinshi, he fell head first. "Senior Marshal Brother," Emotinga shouted. Seeing that there was no more danger, Jing Xingji withdrew his sword intent and let go of her. She rushed forward, knelt down, and helped Qinshi up. Qinshi's eyes were closed, his teeth were tightly clenched, and his complexion was deathly pale. Emotinga's heart was beating fiercely. She reached out to feel his pulse, and found that there was still spiritual breath flowing. Only then did she heave a sigh of relief, feeling a little vitality in her empty heart. He's alive. At least he's still alive. Jing Xingji walked over, and also felt Qinshi's pulse, but the wrinkle on his brows became tighter and tighter. "What's wrong?" Emotinga asked nervously. Due to the gap in their cultivation levels, she couldn't use her spiritual aura to investigate the specific situation inside Qinshi's body. She only knew that there was spiritual aura in his meridians. After a long time, Jing Xingji finally let go of Qinshi's pulse and said, "It's very bad. The spiritual aura inside his body is almost empty, his sea of knowledge is closed, and his dantian is damaged." He glanced at Emotinga, deliberated over his words then said carefully, "Although he didn't die this time, I don't know if he can hold on in this kind of situation." Emotinga was stunned for a while. She had also encountered this kind of situation before when her sea of knowledge was closed. The sea of knowledge was where one's thoughts resided. Once the sea of knowledge was closed, a person was equivalent to a living dead without consciousness. What was worse was that the spiritual aura inside his body was almost empty, and his dantian was damaged. Without consciousness, cultivators couldn't cultivate, and without cultivating, they couldn't absorb spiritual aura to heal their injuries. If they couldn't heal their injuries, their dantian's injuries would worsen step by step. At that time, their bodies would slowly collapse, and they would die unconsciously. Even if they survived, their cultivation levels would drop a lot when they woke up one day. Fortunately, Qinshi was already a nascent soul cultivator. His body was reconstructed when he formed his nascent soul, and he also practiced body refining techniques. As long as his dantian was protected, his body shouldn't shrink. But even so, it was unknown when he would open his sea of knowledge and wake up. Maybe 1 or 2 days, maybe 1 or 2 years, or even 10 or 100 years. This was the reason why Jing Xingji found it hard to say. In the main hall, the 3 living people and the 3 half-dead people all fell into silence. After a while, Jing Xingji suddenly raised his head vigilantly. "We can't delay any longer. Let's get out." The devil aura outside had almost completely dissipated. In other words, if Master Taoist Yuanmu's guess was correct, the primordial devil aura had already been absorbed. If the person who absorbed the primordial devil aura needed time to fuse with it, that would still be a good thing. But if he came to the main hall immediately, Master Taoist Iron Mask seemed to be roused. He looked at the unconscious Ling Yunhe and Master Taoist Yuanmu, and stared at them with a heavy gaze. Jing Xingji immediately sensed it. With a shake of his arm, the flying sword hovered in the air. But Master Taoist Iron Mask didn't make a move. After a moment of silence, he pulled Ling Yunhe and Master Taoist Yuanmu up, without saying a word, and flew away without looking back. Seeing this, Jing Xingji's tense nerves relaxed. There was a huge gap between his and Master Taoist Iron Mask's cultivation levels. If they fought, it would be really bad. But if he ignored these two people and fled on his own, he would feel bad. He lowered his head to look at the unconscious Qin Shi and the heavy-looking Emotienga. All of a sudden, he really wanted to slap himself. He, Jing Xingji, had lived for nearly 300 years and had always been decisive and ruthless. He never hesitated when he had to be ruthless. In the current situation, if he was ruthless enough, he should have seized the opportunity to snatch them away. Even if he couldn't snatch them away, he should have run far away to avoid trouble. But why couldn't he move now? Chapter 489. Fellow Taoist Qingwei. Jing Xingji's voice brought Emotienga back to reality. She took a deep breath and tried her best to calm down. Things had already happened. It was useless to be sad and dazed. She should think of a way to solve it. She lowered her head and looked at his ignorant appearance. She made up her mind. Every time, it was you who protected me. This time let me protect you. Let's go. Jing Xingji felt comforted when he saw the light in her eyes. Emo Qingwei knew what was important. If she only cared about being sad at this time, he would feel sorry for Qin Shoujing for marrying such a stupid woman. Emotienga looked up and suddenly asked, "Fellow Taoist Jing, can you protect us from the passage to the Immortal Palace by yourself?" Jing Xingji was stunned and said nothing. The temporarily open passage to the Immortal Palace was extremely dangerous. Not to mention protecting a living dead and a core formation cultivator. He was already in danger when he came in. With the experience of coming in, it would be a bit easier for him to go out. But that was it. "We can't go," Emotienga said slowly. "There's not much time left. Presumably, the surviving cultivators in the Immortal Palace have already left. I'm only in the core formation realm, and Senior Marshal Brother is half dead. They know we got treasures from the Immortal Palace. As soon as we show up, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape the fate of being killed and robbed." At that time, even the kindest revered Wu Ming couldn't stand up to protect them. She looked up at Jing Xingji and said, "Fellow Taoist Jing, it's already good enough that you can leave here safely by yourself. There are so many late-stage cultivators outside. How can you protect the two of us? Besides, if you stay with us, you'll also be implicated. Although you're very annoying, you're always trustworthy at critical moments. I don't want to drag you down anymore." Heh. Jing Xingji showed a bitter smile. He really didn't know whether he should be happy or depressed. Although he was extremely unlucky and wasn't liked by his master, he had always been successful among women. In the end, she said he had a very annoying personality. Even so, in the cultivation world, where there were few sincere people, she was willing to trust him. Looking down at the woman in front of him, he suddenly heaved a long sigh. The death of his master, and the unfair treatment he received in the ancient sword sect, caused him to harbor hostility towards everyone in the world. For so many years, he had always put on a playful attitude. His tongue was like honey, and his attitude was frivolous. However, in reality, he was just a bystander, not willing to get close to everyone. Qin Shoujing was an exception, because when they first met, she was still a proud son of heaven. It was also because from the beginning to the end, whether she was a proud son of heaven or an abandoned disciple of Gujin sect, his attitude was always the same. He actually held a certain amount of gratitude towards Qin Shoujing. Because Qin Shoujing was the only person he could be sure of who treated him with sincerity. And now, there was one more, a person who expressed his sincerity to him regardless of whether he liked or hated him. We still have to leave the underground palace. It's very dangerous here, Jing Xingji said. As for after we leave, if you're willing to part with your treasures, we can trade with others in exchange for their protection. Emotinga shook her head lightly. Who should I trade with? Everyone knows that senior brother and I will definitely obtain the treasure. Everyone is envious. Originally, trading with the Julian sect was extremely good. They have 2 late nascent soul cultivators, and their strength is the strongest. But now, Jing Xingji also fell silent. She was right. In the face of profit, the person whom he chose to trade with had to be strong enough. Otherwise, even if others were to covet him, he wouldn't be able to protect himself. As for the underground palace, it's even more impossible to leave. That soul formation refined corpse outside is too dangerous. Even if it was as perfected Yuan Mu had guessed, that the Ghost Square Demon Lord had obtained the Essence Demon Stone Steel and absorbed the Essence Demon Chi here, he was still a human. If they met, they could still negotiate. However, the refined corpse outside was a dead object. There was no reason to negotiate. Besides, as long as he was conscious, the Phantom Square Demon Lord would not stay here forever. Jing Xingji's eyes flashed, and he finally asked, "Then do you want to stay here? Once the passageway to the Immortal Palace is closed, it cannot be opened again. You said it yourself. At that time, he would be trapped in the Immortal Palace. So what if he advanced to the nascent soul stage? What if Qin Shoujing wakes up? You're still so young. Are you going to waste your remaining lifespan here? If you can't leave, what's the difference between dying and not being able to leave?" "I don't know." Emotinga rubbed the space between her eyebrows tiredly. She lowered her head to look at Qin Shi's ignorant face. "If I go out, I'll die. I can only choose to live now. If there was a way out, why would she choose this way?" Because of Qin Shi's arrival, she no longer needed to rely on Julian sect to trade with them. On the other hand, if it wasn't for Qin Shi and Julian sect wanted to take the Vermilion Bird Bow, she certainly wouldn't have gotten involved, and she wouldn't have fallen out with Julian sect. Fu Yaozi had already planned for her. She would give up some benefits in exchange for the protection of these late nascent soul cultivators. She would get what she wanted as long as they could tolerate it. Unfortunately, her plans didn't change quickly. She had already taken another path. Even if she behaved humbly now, those late nascent soul cultivators wouldn't tolerate it. Time passed bit by bit, but Jing Xingji still didn't say anything. He just stood there, neither saying he would leave nor saying he would stay. "Fellow Taoist Jing." After a moment of hesitation, Emotinga took out the Qianquan ring from inside her robe and tossed it to him. "You haven't obtained any benefits from our cooperation this time, but you've been dragged into trouble. This is our harvest this time. Since I won't leave, I'll give it to you." Jing Xingji took the ring and was stunned. This Qianquan ring was naturally the one he got from Master Taoist Yuan Mu just now. He knew very well how valuable it was. Although Qianquan rings were extremely precious and could only be possessed by high-level cultivators in the Middle Ages, they were only storage-type magic weapons in the end. The most valuable thing was the crystal jades inside. If one appeared in a high-level cultivator's trade fair, it would cause a commotion, let alone there were so many of them here. This Qianquan ring was much richer than his entire net worth. He knew Qin Shoujing, as the Grand Supreme Elder of Xianqing School, would only have more wealth than him, but it also wouldn't surpass this Qianquan ring. What he didn't know was that the two of them previously obtained a deification cultivator's Qianquan ring, which contained a lot more things than this one. Besides, Qin Shi was unconscious now, and they didn't know whether he could hold on or not. So how could Emotinga be in the mood to divide the loot? "Do you know how much wealth is in this?" Jing Xingji asked. "Are you really going to give it all to me?" Emotinga chuckled softly. "I'm already giving you things, yet you're still talking so much nonsense." She paused for a moment, then took out a blank jade slip from her Qianquan bag. She recorded something, then threw it to him. "This is the way out. Take it and leave quickly. If you delay any longer, you might not be able to leave." The devil aura outside almost disappeared. Jing Xingji looked down at the Qianquan ring in his palm, and finally clenched it. "All right, take care." Emotinga nodded, then said faintly, "See you later." "See you later." He spat out the last two words with some difficulty. He took a deep look at them for the last time, then finally turned around and left without looking back. When Jing Xingji's figure disappeared, Mo Tiange held Qin Shi in her arms and stared blankly at the empty hall. After a long time, she once again heaved a long sigh. She didn't know whether this was the right choice or not, but she knew she absolutely couldn't leave the underground palace now. The reason was exactly what Jing Xingji said just now. She and Qin Shi had treasures on them, so without martial strength, they would inevitably become targets for others to kill. Moreover, they couldn't pass through the passage to the immortal palace. There was a deification refined corpse above, so the immortal palace wasn't as safe as this underground palace. As for the future, she could only take it one step at a time. Girl, why are you doing this? Fu Yaozi's sigh rang in her mind. Mo Tiange was slightly startled, but she soon smiled and said, Master, you're awake? As time passed, Fu Yaozi's divine sense became weaker and weaker, and he had to rest longer and longer. Fu Yaozi said, if you give up on your senior martial brother, you can definitely go out with that sword cultivator boy. Since he has the ability to pass through the passage to the immortal palace alone, plus the life-saving technique Master taught you, you won't be a problem. Mo Tiange shook her head. I never thought about giving up on senior martial brother. Looking at Qin Shi's calm face, she said, Senior martial brother never gave up on me, and I also won't give up on him. He had saved her too many times. When she was in the aura refining realm, she was ignorant and caused trouble. She was chased by people from Yunwu sect, but it was him who arrived in time. When she was building her foundation, she mistakenly entered Zhong Muling's illusory sky formation. It was also him who rushed over regardless of the dangers. When she was forming her gold core on Demonic Mountain, he would rather face danger alone to protect her. This time, she went to Yunzhong and couldn't go back. It was him who didn't hesitate to cross the South Sea to find her. Maybe at first, it was only because of responsibility, but with so much affection, she couldn't let him down. She never wanted to let him down. If she gave up on him, so what if she left the immortal palace? Although her goal was the great Tao, she would never go against her heart. After a long silence, Fu Yaozi said, Sure enough, I didn't choose the wrong person. If you give up, you won't be worthy of me passing on my mantle to you. Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't say anything after being praised. She didn't know the extent of the injury to Qin Shi's dantian, but it didn't mean she couldn't do anything. She took out a 9 revolutions yang restoration pill from her Qingquan bag and fed it to him. Then she helped him up and transferred her Yin's spiritual aura to him. As long as his dantian was preserved, he could keep his cultivation level and have a chance to wake up. Now, she transferred her spiritual aura to him first, letting the Yin spiritual aura combine with the Yang spiritual aura in his body. That way they could form a cycle and slowly repair his dantian. As for the extent of the repair, that would depend on heaven's will. Time passed slowly, but the underground palace was still quiet. Even the original devil disappeared without a trace. Guifeng Devil Monarch and his disciple were nowhere to be seen. After a long time, Mo Tiange finally stopped healing. She tiredly wiped the sweat on her forehead. Just now, she blocked the rebound of the vermilion bird's divine power for Qin Shi. Then, she was affected by the spiritual aura pressure of the 4 nascent soul cultivators fighting, causing her spiritual aura to be in disorder. Her current state wasn't very good, so this was all she could do. She checked Qin Shi's condition. Seeing that his complexion wasn't as unsightly as before, and that the spiritual aura inside his body seemed to have increased, she heaved a sigh of relief. She planned to rest for a while, then enter the virtual sky world to recuperate. Even if she was trapped here, it didn't mean she had given up her pursuit of the great Tao. She had to heal her injuries and cultivate. After the spiritual aura inside her body calmed down, she held Qin Shi and was about to enter the virtual sky world when her divine sense sensed someone approaching. Chapter 490. At this time, the passage to the immortal palace was about to close, so everyone should be rushing to leave. Why was there still someone here? Mo Tiange was about to enter the virtual sky world when she sensed a strong sword intent from this person. A thought flashed in her mind. She stopped summoning the virtual sky world and turned to look. "I'm back," the person said weakly and showed her a bitter smile. Emotianga was stunned. Why didn't you leave?" He said they'd meet again. But he didn't have to be so fast, right? Alas, the person heaved a long sigh. Who else could it be but Jing Xingji? He must have been gone for a long time, right? According to the map she gave him, he should have left the passage to the Immortal Palace. Why did he come back? Emotianga was very confused. Jing Xingji spread his hands and said, "It seems I'm destined to stay here with you too. What's going on?" Emotianga was confused. Without her and Qin Shi dragging him down, with Jing Xingji's ability, it shouldn't be difficult for him to leave the passage, right? Why did he come back? Jing Xingji sighed deeply. Fatigue appeared on his face as he tossed something over to her. Emotianga caught it. It was the interspatial ring. Jing Xingji said, "Although I'm cruel and merciless, I never break my promise. I cooperate with others, but I won't take the spoils for myself. This time, I suffered because of you, so I took all the high-grade spirit stones and most of the crystal jades inside as compensation. This is yours." Although the universe ring was rare, it was just a storage magic treasure after all. For him, high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades were more practical, as they could help him cultivate. Among them, the crystal jades could also be embedded into his life-flying sword, which was much more effective than the crystal soul jade. After refining them, the power of the flying sword would increase greatly. Jing Xingji was stunned at this thought. If he couldn't get out and was locked in this immortal palace for the rest of his life, what would the power of his flying sword matter? When he left the celestial pole, he thought that if he became a venerable sword in the late stage of the nascent soul realm one day, he must return to the celestial pole and Gujian sect to take back what belonged to him and his master. Therefore, although he became an individual cultivator and wandered around, he never gave up on himself. But now, when he came back, the idea of revenge never crossed his mind. In the end, he smiled bitterly. Forget it. It wasn't that he didn't want to go out. Who asked him to be so unlucky to meet these two nemesis? Emotianga held the Qianquan ring and stared at Jing Xingji, waiting for his explanation. Jing Xingji sighed again. He had sighed more today than he had in the past few hundred years. In the next moment, he frowned and spat out a mouthful of blood. Taoist Jing. Jing Xingji fell to the ground and carelessly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He smiled at her. "Do you understand now? It's not that I don't want to leave, but I can't." Emotianga's gaze was complicated as she asked in a low voice. "Who are you?" "Of course it's those two from the Juyan sect." Jing Xingji said faintly. "I met them again in front of the Immortal Palace's passageway. That mid-stage nascent soul realm cultivator has been recuperating up there and hasn't come down yet. One of them is in the middle stage, and the other is in the late stage. I can only run for my life." Emotianga was speechless for a long time. Just now, Master Taoist Iron Mask didn't attack them because he was alone, and he had to take Master Taoist Yuanmu and Ling Yunhe into consideration. If they left this place and met up with Ling Xiyu and ran into Jing Xingji again, they would naturally vent their anger on him. Although Jing Xingji was powerful, he was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. When he was besieged by a mid-stage cultivator and a late-stage cultivator, he could only flee. Emotianga didn't feel too guilty about this. Jing Xingji chose to cooperate with them, so he naturally had to bear the risks. But in any case, his inability to leave was related to the two of them. The most important thing was that the three of them were now in the same boat. The passageway to the Immortal Palace was about to close, and they didn't have the strength to go out. After a long time, Emotianga also sighed. She took out a bottle of medicinal pills from her Qianquan bag and threw it to him. "There's no other way. Recuperate first." Jing Xingji took it, opened the jade bottle and sniffed it. His eyes brightened. "You really have a lot of good things. You even have 9 transformations Yang return pill." Right, Qin Shoujing's pill concocting skills aren't bad. And he's rich, so he naturally used whatever was useful. He poured out a pill and swallowed it. After thinking for a while, He carefully put the whole bottle of medicinal pills into his robe and said, "It's mine. In any case, you're also somewhat responsible for me not being able to leave, so I'll take some compensation first." Emotianga didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was really quickly recuperate. Stop talking nonsense. Although these medicinal pills were precious, they didn't lack spiritual plants and could concoct them at any time. So giving him a bottle was nothing. However, this was troublesome. With other people here, how could she enter the virtual sky world? After thinking for a while, she shook her head helplessly. Forget it. The devil aura in this sacrificial temple was already gone, and it was full of spiritual aura. There was also the remnant vermilion bird's breath, so it wasn't much worse than the virtual sky world. In any case, she still had a lot of medicinal pills, so she could just recuperate here. As for the future, if she really couldn't get out, there would always be opportunities. With that thought in mind, she took out a piece of demonic beast skin from her Qianquan bag and helped Qinshi settle down. She also swallowed a medicinal pill, then sat cross-legged to adjust her breath. In order to heal Qinshi, Emotianga almost used up all the spiritual aura in her body. This adjustment took almost a day and a night. When she opened her eyes, Jing Xingji was no longer there. The passage to the immortal palace was closed, so presumably, there was no one else. Maybe he went outside to take a walk. They didn't know how long they would stay here, so it was good for him to familiarize himself with the environment. Emotianga thought for a while, and took advantage of Jing Xingji's absence to take Qin into the virtual sky world. As soon as she entered, she released Xiaohua and Xiaofan. They wouldn't fight, so they could continue cultivating in the virtual sky world. As for Feifei, it was useful outside. Seeing Xiaofan, she couldn't help but remember her promise to the Sea Dragon clan. If one day she passed away, or if she was fated to advance to the deification realm, she would terminate the spiritual beast contract and let it go back to the Eastern Sea. Now that she was locked in this immortal palace, she didn't know whether she could still keep her promise. She shook her head and put this matter at the back of her mind. She would try her best to fulfill her promise, but she obviously couldn't now. Soon after, she packed up some things and took Qin out of the virtual sky world, returning to the Vermilion Bird main hall. There were no other buildings in this underground palace, except for this sacrificial temple. Although the spiritual aura inside was abundant, it was too gloomy. If there was a chance, she still had to go upstairs. But she couldn't do it in the short term, because that deification realm refined corpse was still wandering above. With that thought in mind, Emotianga took things out of her Qianquan bag one by one. Before long, Jing Xingji came back. His steps were light, and he was in good spirits. Apparently, his injuries had recovered well. When he saw Emotianga, he was stunned for a long time before he pointed at the things around her and asked, "You? I can't leave for the time being, so I have to live more comfortably, right?" Emotianga glanced at him and calmly poured herself a cup of tea. She arranged a small cultivation room in a corner of the main hall. In the innermost part was a bamboo bed covered with a piece of soft animal skin, where Qinshi was placed. Next to him was another piece of animal skin with a praying mat on top of it, which was her place to cultivate. In front of her was a tea table with a small tea stove on the side. In the outermost part, there was a row of short tables with all kinds of books on them. They were both decorations and partitions. Jing Xingji was amazed and shook his head. "Women will always be women." Emotianga pointed at the other side of the vermilion bird statue. "That side is yours. We won't disturb each other." With the statue and the sacrificial table as a partition, they wouldn't be able to see each other at a glance, and would have some private space. Jing Xingji glanced at them but didn't say anything. He walked towards her and said, "I just walked around the entire underground palace." Emotianga pushed out another praying mat and let him sit on the opposite side of the tea table. She asked, "What did you find?" Jing Xingji hesitated for a while and said, "Someone didn't go out like us." "What?" Emotianga was surprised, but she soon frowned. Could it be that Guifeng Devil Monarch? They couldn't go out because their strength was limited, but other people didn't have this problem, right? Jing Xingji nodded at first, but then shook his head. "Yes and no. What do you mean? That Guifeng devil monarch has died, Jing Xingji said. Emotinga was shocked. What? Although she had guessed it, she never believed that the devil monarch, who could compete with revered Wu Ming, had died just like that. She couldn't help but think of Guifeng City, the evaluation the devil cultivators in the city had of Guifeng devil monarch, and his secret scheme of obtaining the heavenly devil tower. Although he didn't have much time left in his lifespan, dying just like that was really hard to believe. What did you see? You said there was an original devil steel here, and it was the source of the devil aura from before, right? Emotinga nodded. When she first entered the underground palace, she said that to Jing Xingji. I just walked around the underground palace and found that steel. And then? Emotinga asked. Could it be that Guifeng devil monarch couldn't absorb that much original devil aura, so his body exploded and he died? Guifeng devil monarch died next to that steel, Jing Xingji said. But there's still one person alive. Emotinga was stunned and blurted out, Yang Qingji? Yes, it's him, Jing Xingji said. Right now, his whole body is covered in devil aura, and there are countless devils scattered around him. However, the devil aura of these devils has all disappeared, and they've become dead things. Emotinga's expression changed. Could it be that the one who cultivated the great primordial devil technique and absorbed the devil aura here was him? Great primordial devil technique? Jing Xingji asked. Emotinga nodded slowly. Yes, a top-notch devil path cultivation technique is recorded on that steel. It's the great primordial devil technique. Jing Xingji frowned and thought about it, but in the end, he couldn't figure it out and shook his head. Aside from that time on Demonic Mountain, he didn't have any contact with Master Song Feng. So he didn't know that Master Song Feng cultivated the great primordial devil technique. So he didn't know what kind of devil technique it was. I don't know what the great primordial devil technique is, Jing Xingji said. When I saw that boy practicing devil technique, I wanted to kill him with my sword. But on second thought, the passage to the Immortal Palace has disappeared. So it's good to have one more person. Maybe he'll be of help when we find a way out. Fortunately, you didn't kill him. Emotinga breathed a sigh of relief. She and Yang Qingji could be considered old acquaintances, and he was a decent person. After thinking for a while, she frowned again. How did Guifeng devil monarch die? Since he died, why is Yang Qingji still alive? I don't know about that, Jing Xingji said. Guifeng devil monarch died next to Yang Qingji, and he seemed to be a Dharma protector. I guess he probably died to protect his disciple. Chapter 491. Emotinga fell into contemplation. They originally guessed that Ghost Square Demon Monarch absorbed the primordial devil aura, but they didn't expect him to die, and the person who cultivated the primordial devil art was Yang Qingji. Yang Qingji was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm now. Even if he absorbed the primordial devil aura, he couldn't advance immediately, so he couldn't get out. This is going to be fun. Emotinga shook her head and sighed. I thought we were unlucky enough, but I didn't expect someone else would be unlucky as well. Let's not talk about this first. Jing Xingji asked. Are you familiar with this person? Is he reliable? If I have a grudge against him, I'll kill him to avoid future troubles. That's not necessary. Emotinga shook her head. Although I don't have a deep friendship with him, we cooperated once. He's a good partner. Now that he can't get out, and there's no conflict of interest between us, we can live in harmony. Maybe we can even work together to get out. And Jing Xingji thought about it and agreed. But we can't be careless. If he wakes up, I've prepared for it. Emotinga smiled and pointed around the hall. It's hard for ordinary people to notice this defensive formation. If he finds this place, it'll warn us. Jing Xingji didn't notice it just now, so he couldn't help but exclaim, your attainments and formations are really good. Emotinga just smiled bitterly and didn't answer. No matter how good her attainments and formations were, they couldn't exceed her realm by too much. She couldn't do anything about the ancient restrictions around this immortal palace. Jing Xingji turned to look at Qin Shi and asked, how is he? Emotinga put away her melancholy, knelt up, and pulled Qin Shi's fur. I don't know. I can only feed him healing pills every few days. hoping it can slowly heal the injury in his dantian. Jing Xingji frowned. If Qin Shi's sea of knowledge was closed, he couldn't cultivate. If his body was full of spiritual aura, this method would work. However, his spiritual aura was almost empty, so it was hard to say whether this method would be effective or not. Medicinal pills also needed to be refined with spiritual aura to release their medicinal effects. Otherwise, most of the medicinal effects would be wasted. He reached out to check Qin Shi's pulse. After a while, a surprised expression appeared on his face. Where did the spiritual aura in his body come from? Due to the gap in their cultivation levels, Emotinga couldn't clearly probe Qin Shi's situation. At that moment she asked with concern, "How is he?" Jing Xingji said, "A day ago, the spiritual aura inside his body was almost empty, but now there's weak spiritual aura circulating." After examining for a while he said with certainty, "That's right, this spiritual aura is circulating on its own. How strange could it be that his sea of consciousness was not closed?" "That's not it." Jing Xingji was puzzled no matter how he thought about it, but Emotinga's spirit was greatly aroused. She naturally knew the reason. The two of them no longer had pure yin and yang constitutions. She cultivated the origin, while Qin Shi cultivated the three primordial cycles. Both of them had the concept of endless cycles. There was residual spiritual aura inside Qin Shi's body. After Emotinga poured her own spiritual aura into his body, the yin and yang aura automatically formed a cycle, which was why this happened. Since there was a small cycle inside his body, the spiritual aura wouldn't completely disperse. As long as she replenished his spiritual aura from time to time, the medicinal power of the medicinal pills for healing could also be dissolved. In this way, as long as the medicinal pills continued, his dantian would be restored one day. Once his injuries were healed, the possibility of his sea of consciousness opening would be very high. For more than a day, although she tried her best to stay calm, deep in her heart, she was in a trance. She was confused about many things, so she couldn't concentrate. It was only now that she felt her mind was clear and full of vitality. "How's his dantian? Is it better?" This time, Jing Xingji took a long time to examine it. He answered, "Although it's not very obvious, it's a bit better than before." He paused for a moment then said, "There's something inside his dantian. It's very powerful. I can't get close to it." Jing Xingji then turned to look at her, seemingly waiting for her to explain. Emotinga knew this should be the yang spiritual bead. However, it wasn't good for her to explain it to others, so she said, "Years ago, he had a fated chance and obtained a treasure. This thing was refined in his dantian, so it can contain a lot of spiritual aura. Presumably, the thing that absorbed the vermilion bird's breath just now was this thing." "I see." He never understood why Qin Shi absorbed the vermilion bird's breath completely, causing the vermilion bird bow to also become his. Now that Emotinga said this, he finally understood what happened. However, both the vermilion bird's breath and the vermilion bird bow were absorbed by this thing. Does this mean it recognizes him as its master? How could Emotinga answer this question? This was also her first time seeing a psychic magic weapon. Jing Xingji also didn't expect to get an answer from her. He thought for a moment then said with a smile, "This time, Qin Shojing really profited from a disaster. Many cultivators can't even see a psychic magic weapon in their entire lives." Emotinga heard the jealousy in his words and couldn't help but laugh. Even if he obtained the vermilion bird bow, what's the use? We're trapped here now, and I don't know when we'll be able to leave. "That's not necessarily true," Jing Xingji said. "Don't you know the secret technique to open the passage to Immortal Palace? It's just that no one can use it. Right now there are 4 living people in this Immortal Palace. You, me, Qin Shojing, and that devil cultivator boy. If we all cultivate to the nascent soul realm..." "Why are you looking at me like that?" Emotinga said. "I want to see whether you can read minds or not." Jing Xingji was speechless for a while. "So you've already thought about this matter?" Emotinga nodded. "You're right, but not completely right. I can indeed learn that secret technique from that senior. But the power needed to open the passage to Immortal Palace isn't ordinary. Previously, the spiritual aura provided by the other 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators and my 5 senior martial brothers was enough to open the passage. If there were only 4 of us, we'd have to all advance to the late stage to realize it. All of us in the late stage. Disappointment flashed in Jing Xingji's eyes. Mo Tiange and Yang Qingji hadn't advanced to the nascent soul realm yet, and he himself had just advanced to the nascent soul realm not long ago. According to common sense, it would take at least several hundred years for him to advance to the late stage, let alone Qin Shoujing. Seeing his expression, Mo Tiange smiled. There's another way. What is it? Jing Xingji's hope was reignited. One of us can advance to the deification realm. As long as there's one deification cultivator, this secret technique can be used. Seeing Jing Xingji's expression, she laughed even more happily. What's with your expression? Saying it's useless. Jing Xingji rolled his eyes. Advancing to the deification realm was more difficult than advancing to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. But at least there's hope. She looked down at his sleeping face and said softly, as long as there's hope, we can't give up. Jing Xingji looked at her in silence for a long time and suddenly said in a deep voice, Mo Qingwei, now I know why Qin Shoujing chose you. Without waiting for Mo Tiange to speak, he stood up and walked to the other side of the statue. His voice was low. You two are very similar. You're really lucky to meet a person whose soul matches yours. After her initial communication with Jing Xingji, the two of them lived a life of occasional communication without disturbing each other. Usually, in addition to looking after Qin Shi, Mo Tiange studied cultivation techniques and learned miscellaneous things. Occasionally, she would concoct medicinal pills and concoct healing medicinal pills for Qin Shi. She was worried about Qin Shi, so she stayed in the main hall and left Fei to inquire about the situation in the surroundings. As for Jing Xingji, he casually took a praying mat from his Qingkuan bag and threw it in the corner. He minded his own business, recuperated, and wandered around when he had nothing to do. As for Yang Qingji, he hadn't woken up yet. He was still in the stage of refining primordial devil aura. Fei and Jing Xingji were very interested in him. They went to see him every day, reported to her when they came back, and guessed when he would stop cultivating. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. Fei was fine since it was a playful spiritual beast, but Jing Xingji also had this kind of personality. He was really different from when she first met him. A month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, after feeding Qin Shi medicinal pills, Fu Yao's voice suddenly rang in her mind, which had been quiet for a long time. Girl. Mo Tiange was happy. Master, you haven't spoken for a long time. Fu Yao's voice sounded a little tired. Master has rested for so long just for today. Mo Tiange was stunned. She suddenly realized something, and was a little scared. Master. It seems you guessed it. Fu Yao's tone was still calm. Master's divine sense is about to dissipate. I'm afraid I can't accompany you. Master. Why are you sad? Parting between life and death is a common thing in life. Besides, didn't you say Master's original body has long advanced to the deification realm? I don't know whether my original body is still alive or not. If it's already dead, it won't be a waste of my time in this world. If it's still alive, maybe we'll meet again. Mo Tiange resisted the urge to cry and said in a low voice, Yes, Master. Although they only got along for a few years, this Master's wholehearted care and guidance made her feel long-lasting warmth in the lonely and helpless Yunzhong. Fu Yao's soft laughter rang in her mind. I don't know whether my original body has a disciple or not. If not, your Master's only successor. After he finished speaking, his tone became serious and he said solemnly, Girl, listen. Although you're trapped here, it's not that there's no hope of getting out. You must not be depressed, understand? Yes, Master. Mo Tiange couldn't help but look serious. The space-tearing technique to open the space was divided into 5 parts. Even if I teach it to you, you won't be able to use it. However, the method to open the Immortal Palace's restriction was secretly taught by me. I only borrowed the power of the other 4 people at the same time. This secret technique isn't trivial. I didn't have it for a long time, so I only have a rough understanding of it. Now I'll teach it to you. Study it well, and maybe you'll find a better way. Hearing this, Emotienga was a bit surprised. Master, so you're saying I don't need that much spiritual aura to open the Immortal Palace's restriction? Yes, everything depends on your talent. Fu Yao paused for a moment then said, before you master this secret technique, it's better to form your nascent soul here. This place is far away from the worldly affairs, and there are no disputes between cultivators. It's a good place for closed-door meditation. I'll teach you my soul formation experience, so you can study it well. I understand, Master. Chapter 492. She calmed her mind, gathered her spirit and chi, emptied her consciousness, and let down her vigilance in her sea of knowledge. Then she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her head. Many things rushed into her mind. Some turned into words, some turned into pictures. These things kept flashing in her mind, until they were deeply engraved in her memory. Emotienga fell into a brief state of confusion. This process didn't take long. Emo Yaoqing used this method to pass the art of Sinu to her. At that time, she was still immortal, and her sea of knowledge couldn't bear such power, so she fainted for a long time. But now she was a core formation cultivator. She was completely different from before, so she quickly woke up. Master, Emotienga called softly in her mind, but there was no response. Master, she was a little anxious, but there was still no sound in her mind. She picked up the Fuxing sword, and found that there was no divine sense on it. She sat paralyzed on the praying mat, and didn't recover for a long time. Fuxing Yao disappeared. Although she knew this day would come, she still couldn't help but feel sad and melancholy when he really disappeared. Master said if they were fated, they might meet again. But what were the chances of a cultivator from 100,000 years ago living until now, even if he had advanced to the deification realm? Even if he really lived until now, where could she find him? It was just a comfort. What's wrong? On the other side, Jing Xingji stopped cultivating and was about to go out for a stroll, but he saw her sitting there with a tired expression. Emotienga shook her head gently. It's nothing. There are just some things I need to get used to. Jing Xingji stared at her for a while. He couldn't figure it out, so he didn't care and said, I'm going out for a walk. Do you want to let your little guy go with me? He was talking about Feifei. This human and beast had similar hobbies. These days they often wandered around together and studied Yangqingji. Emotienga glanced at Feifei, who was curled up on the side to protect her. She sighed and said, It's up to you. If it wants to go, then go. When Feifei heard her voice, it raised its head, swung its golden tail, and jumped onto Jing Xingji's shoulder. Then we'll go first. Emotienga nodded absent-mindedly. Watching the human and beast disappear, Emotienga closed her eyes. Master. The additional things in her mind made her feel very complicated. The secret technique that opened up the passage to the Immortal Palace was actually a set of array formation techniques, called the Profound Void Cloud Formation. Before this, Fu Yaozi had already taught her the method of setting up the formation and the incantation to use it. Now he was instilling the principles of setting up the formation into her mind. This formation consisted of a star chart and a 5-star formation. It required 5 mediums to inject powerful energy into the formation, and then activate the formation's power to shatter the void in one go. Of course, this so-called shattering the void and tearing space was actually very crude. It was not the true shattering of the void. Even in ancient times, the void shattering technique could only be mastered by cultivators with great supernatural powers. The mystical cloud formation that Fu Yaozi knew about was created by a genius low-level cultivator in the ancient cultivation world, based on the void shattering technique. The profound void cloudlink formation required much less spiritual energy, but the space it created was also extremely unstable. Even so, in today's human world, this technique was already an amazing magical power. If it was spread out, those great cultivators would probably covet it. There were also the experiences of nascent soul formation, the cultivation method and strange techniques of the body of origin. This master she picked up halfway actually passed on all his secret techniques to her. Several years ago, she accidentally made the Fuxing sword recognize her as its master and gained Fu Yaozi's approval. In the past few years, this master taught her many things, But he only had one request that couldn't be called a request. But today, he passed on the secret techniques he spent his whole life studying to her. But he disappeared without a trace. Emotienga took a deep breath. Her eyes were slightly wet, and she told herself to cheer up. Since she received her master's inheritance, she should cultivate well and not let down her master's good intentions. Maybe one day, they would really meet again. Being trapped in the underground palace was very boring. Every day she did the same thing. However, this was not a big deal. Who didn't go through lonely cultivation when they reached the core formation realm and nascent soul realm? Entering closed-door meditation for dozens of years was common. Being trapped in the underground palace was just changing a place to cultivate. For Emotienga, this kind of life wasn't too difficult. She took good care of him every day, and Qinshi's injuries were improving. Probably in a year or two, his dantian would be restored to its original state. In this way his cultivation would be preserved. As for when he would wake up, it was hard to say. Jing Xingji speculated that the reason why he closed his sea of knowledge was because the power of the vermilion bird's breath was too great, and he couldn't bear it. As long as the yang spiritual bead in his body completely absorbed the breath, he should be able to wake up. These were all good news, which made Emotienga feel that even if she was trapped in the underground palace and couldn't go out, she was still full of hope. Compared to the more than 50 years of separation, Qinshi was by her side now. He just couldn't wake up for a while, which was enough comfort. Mechanical puppets. Emotienga put the jade slip on the tea table, tapped the table lightly, and sank into contemplation. Before he left, Fu Yaozi told her to do closed-door meditation here. But after careful consideration, she felt it wasn't the right time. First, Qinshi hadn't woken up, so she couldn't rest assured in this underground palace. Even if she entrusted him to Jing Xingji, it would still be the same. Second, it wasn't easy to find a safe place to do closed-door meditation, and if she wanted to enter the virtual sky world, she couldn't explain it to Jing Xingji. Third, if she wanted to do closed-door meditation, she would have to form her nascent soul. There were still a lot of things she had to prepare, so she had to settle everything and have nothing to worry about. With these considerations, she decided to wait for Qinshi to wake up before considering closed-door meditation. She might as well use her spare time to study miscellaneous studies. Whether it was the mysterious void cloud connecting formation, or Fu Yaozi's art of the origin, they were things that could only be comprehended by nascent soul cultivators. With her current realm, she still couldn't understand them. Therefore, Emotienga picked up the relic of an ancient deification cultivator. Introduction to Mechanisms. This introduction to mechanisms was easy to understand and didn't restrict one's realm. From making simple mechanisms at the beginning to making elementary puppets at the end, there was a very detailed explanation. It was a good introductory book. If she could thoroughly understand this introduction to mechanisms, making simple puppets wouldn't be a problem. The so-called simple puppets, in the eyes of ancient cultivators, were enough to reach the core formation realm based on today's standards. With core formation puppets, she could do a lot more things. For example, in the immortal palace above the underground palace, because there was a deification realm refined corpse, they didn't dare to leave the underground palace rashly. Even if they left the underground palace, they still had to be on tenterhooks, because there were some things they couldn't do. But if they had puppets, they could let the puppets go out of the underground palace on their behalf and search for treasures in the immortal palace. The puppets didn't have a human aura, so the refined corpse wouldn't attack them. Moreover, the cultivation level of the core formation realm wasn't low. As expected, the puppets were controlled by the crystal stones she saw in the ancient records of the virtual sky world. Of course, crystal jades and crystal soul jades could also be used. According to this jade slip, the difference between crystal jades, crystal stones, and crystal soul jades lay in the spiritual aura they could provide. Crystal jades were naturally the best. They contained a lot of spiritual aura and had a strong automatic recovery ability. Crystal jades were necessary to make high-level puppets because crystal stones and crystal soul jades weren't enough to provide the spiritual aura needed to control puppets. Ordinary puppets could use crystal stones. Compared to crystal jades, crystal stones weren't precious and were cheap. They just needed to be inlaid a bit more. So most puppets use crystal stones. As for crystal soul jades, because middle and high-level puppets needed too much spiritual aura, crystal soul jades were generally only used to practice with low-level puppets. After she finished reading this jade slip, Emotienga finally realized that the 2 foundation-building puppets Wanderer Ziwei gave her were only for beginners to practice with. After the 2 puppets were broken, she took them apart and examined them. Sure enough, they were inlaid with crystal soul jades. If she wanted to learn the art of mechanisms, there were many materials related to the art of mechanisms in this ancient cultivator's Qianquan ring. In addition, when she just formed her gold core, she exchanged a large amount of crystal soul jades in Quanzhong City, so it was just right for her to practice. Taking advantage of Jing Xingji's absence, Emotienga cleaned up the things in the 2 Qianquan rings. She put all the materials related to the art of mechanisms into a Qianquan bag and started to study them. She had always been serious about her work. Every day, aside from her fixed cultivation time, she spent almost all her time comprehending the art of mechanisms. Soon, she made the first batch of finished products. Jing Xingji was very interested in this. Since he had nothing to do, he squatted beside her with Feifei and watched her make the puppets. Emotienga didn't have any intention of hiding anything. If he wanted to watch, she'd let him watch. It would be best if she could help him. Unfortunately, Jing Xingji obviously wasn't interested in miscellaneous knowledge. In the beginning he was very excited, but after 2 days, he only watched and didn't do anything. A month later, Emotienga made the first batch of puppets. This batch of puppets only had the cultivation level of the peak stage of the aura refining realm, but it was a good start. After she used her divine sense to place restrictions on the puppets, she directed them to leave the underground palace. With the strength of her divine sense now, this wasn't difficult. However, the immortal palace was very big, and these puppets were too weak, so they couldn't go too far. Half a day later, these aura-refining puppets brought back some withered spiritual plants, which made Emotienga overjoyed. This meant that her plan was feasible. If she could create a core formation stage puppet, she would be able to do even more things. Emotienga immersed herself in studying how to make puppets. Several months passed in a flash. During this time, Qinxi's injuries were getting better. His dantian was no longer a hindrance, so he only needed to rest. With the 9 transformations Yang restoration pill, Jing Xingji's injuries healed very quickly. These days, he no longer just meditated and strolled around. He began to find a quiet place to practice his swordsmanship. As for Feifei, it often slipped out of the underground palace and strolled above. Feifei's behavior worried Emotienga. Although it had the ability to coexist peacefully with spiritual beasts, refined corpses weren't living creatures, so they weren't affected. Feifei didn't care at all and said it could handle it. Since it was so confident, Emotienga didn't say anything. Feifei wasn't an ordinary spiritual beast. After all, it was a divine beast, so it always had something special about it. As for Yang Qingji, he still hadn't woken up. Chapter 493. You're still messing around with your lousy toys. Jing Xingji, who found a place to hide and practice swordsmanship, said to Emotienga when he saw the junk in the corner of the Vermilion Bird main hall. Emotienga didn't raise her head and continued to assemble the puppets. The materials of these puppets came from ancient cultivators, so they were extremely sturdy. She spent a lot of effort to make these parts. Whether they're lousy toys or not, you'll know when the time comes, she said casually. From beginning to end, Jing Xingji didn't believe that she could make core formation puppets. The so-called art of puppets and mechanisms had truly disappeared for too long. It had been so long that no one in the cultivation world today believed in its existence. However, it didn't matter whether other people believed it or not. It was enough as long as she believed it herself. Jing Xingji was afraid that when the time came to make the core formation puppets, he would regret it. There were a lot of good things in this immortal palace. Jing Xingji shrugged and planned to go back to his corner to meditate for a while. Although sword cultivators mainly practiced swordsmanship, they weren't martial artists in the secular world. The strength of their spiritual aura directly affected the power of their swordsmanship. Therefore, in addition to practicing swordsmanship, meditation was also indispensable. Because of this, sword cultivators often had a harder time making realms than other cultivators. They had to practice swordsmanship, but they couldn't fall behind in their spiritual aura cultivation, so they had to spend a lot more time than ordinary cultivators. Sword cultivators like Jing Xingji, who formed their nascent soul at the age of nearly 300, could be said to be as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Without extraordinary talent and fated chances, it was simply impossible to achieve this. Therefore, although Jing Xingji always felt he was unlucky, when it came to fated chances, he didn't lose to others. How many sword cultivators in the world could encounter an ancient immortal's mansion in the foundation-building realm and obtain an ancient cultivation sword and its accompanying cultivation method? The sword he obtained back then wasn't inferior to Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword. It just lacked a yang spiritual bead. Jing Xingji was about to go back to meditate when he suddenly saw something out of the corner of his eye. He looked back and was shocked. What's going on? Mo Tiange heard his shout and looked up. What? Look. Jing Xingji pointed at the corner next to her, where Qin Shi was lying. Mo Tiange turned to look and was also shocked. Qin Shi was still lying unconscious, but there was a faint fiery light lingering around his body. Mo Tiange put down the puppet in her hand, then hastily approached him. She reached out and touched him. Although it was called a flame, it wasn't a real flame. There was only a faint red glow coming from Qin Shi's body. Jing Xingji walked closer. Let me see. He grasped Qin Shi's pulse and was just about to pour his spiritual aura into Qin Shi's body. But in the next moment, a strong momentum suddenly burst out from Qin Shi's body, abruptly pushing him away. How could this be? Jing Xingji was dumbfounded for a long time. He was already a nascent soul cultivator. How could he be casually lifted? However, that aura just now could not be faked. What's wrong? Mo Tiange asked with a grave expression. Jing Xingji got up and sat down on the praying mat at the side. He said, "There's a very powerful force inside his body that's blocking my spiritual energy." Mo Tiange was baffled. If Qin Shi was clear-headed, he might have counterattacked automatically, but in that case, his strength definitely wouldn't be enough to push Jing Xingji away. After all, they were both nascent soul cultivators. Now that his sea of consciousness was closed, he was unable to adjust his breathing and cultivate. Logically speaking, such a situation should not have happened. While the two of them were puzzled, the fire on Qin Shi's body became brighter and brighter. The fiery red light penetrated his body. Even his skin became a transparent red, and she could vaguely see a fiery aura flowing in his meridians. Mo Tiange reached out to touch him, and felt even more baffled. Aside from the fire inside his body, Qin Shi was completely normal. His breathing was long and steady, and his pulse was stable. He was no different from sleeping. Even so, what exactly was this thing? Would there be danger later? The two of them stared at each other blankly for a while. Jing Xingji suddenly said, "Don't you feel that the vermilion bird's breath has become stronger again?" This hall was originally the place where the vermilion bird bough was enshrined, and it was also the place where the vermilion bird's breath was the strongest. Even though the vermilion bird bough had been absorbed into Qin Shi's body, the remaining vermilion bird's breath was still strong. Upon hearing what Jing Xingji said, Mo Tiange indeed felt that it seemed to have become a bit hot. Cultivators were immune to cold and heat, let alone she was a core formation cultivator. If even she felt a bit hot, it was clear to what extent this heat had reached. She turned to look at Qin Shi, and found that the red light on his body was becoming stronger and stronger. It almost dyed his whole body red. Could it be? Her expression changed slightly. Without the vermilion bird bough, the vermilion bird's breath had no source. Now that Qin Shi was in this kind of situation, the source of the vermilion bird's breath was naturally his body. What did this mean? The vermilion bird's breath wasn't completely absorbed by the yang spiritual bead, so it was released? Then what about the vermilion bird's bough? There was such a strong vermilion bird's breath on this spirit-connected magic weapon. If the yang spiritual bead couldn't absorb it, would Qinshi's body explode with spiritual aura because of this? Emotienga's expression kept changing. This situation was beyond her knowledge. Even Jing Xingji couldn't help her. If it was, she had to quickly disperse the excess vermilion bird's breath. But if it wasn't, the biggest problem now was that she and Jing Xingji didn't know what was going on, so they couldn't deal with it. If they rashly took measures, they might end up making a fool of themselves. She couldn't use her spiritual aura to investigate the situation inside his body. And he didn't have any special characteristics on his body. Emotienga clenched her teeth and said, "How about I give him a diamond pill to protect his body?" Jing Xingji hesitated for a moment but didn't object. What she said was reasonable. If he protected his body and meridians, even if the vermilion bird's breath really overflowed, he could still hold on for a while. Emotienga took out a jade bottle from her Qingquan bag, poured out a diamond pill, and was about to feed it to Qinshi. This diamond pill was a high-level medicinal pill for body cultivators. It was specially used to temper the body. In the cultivation world, body cultivators were rare, so this medicinal pill was also very rare. If Qinshi hadn't been cultivating body refining techniques, he wouldn't have concocted this kind of medicinal pill. "Don't feed him." A delicate voice rang in her mind. Emotienga stopped and looked at Feifei, who was lazily wagging its tail. Feifei glanced at Jing Xingji, then jumped on the tea table and said with divine comprehension, "He's accepting the vermilion bird's breath to temper his body. If you feed him a diamond pill, he'll suffer a bit more, and the difficulty will be higher. Do you know what's going on? In any case, I'm a divine beast." Feifei curled its lips and lay down to comb its golden fur. The vermilion bird's breath contains powerful vermilion bird divine power. If you want to use it, you have to accept its test. Originally, with his cultivation level, it was impossible for him to pass the test. But who told him to be so lucky? Luck. Yes, if it weren't for that guy who cultivates the ice and fire arts, dispelling the vermilion bird's breath's evil aura that day, he wouldn't have been able to endure it. You guys said that when he tried to take the vermilion bird bow, he was also bounced off, right? Although Feifei wasn't there that day, it had been crouching next to them these days. Occasionally, when Jing Xingji talked to her about this matter, it didn't avoid it, so it knew about this matter very clearly. "You mean the reason why he could survive that day was because of Lingyan?" "That's right. The vermilion bird guards the south. It's the essence of Li fire and symbolizes light and vitality. Among the four symbols, although the vermilion bird isn't as ruthless as the fierce white tiger, its destructive power is the strongest, so it's born with evil aura. According to you guys, that guy cultivates the ice and fire arts, and it happened to dispel the vermilion bird's breath's evil aura, so he had a fated chance." Feifei scratched its head and said disdainfully, "Otherwise, how could a nascent soul cultivator like him obtain the inheritance of the vermilion bird's breath? Those people were also stupid. Even if he cultivates the ice and fire arts, what's the big deal in the core formation realm? In the distant past era, void refinement and body integration great cultivators didn't dare to directly face the divine beast's breath." Emotienga was speechless for a while, then asked, "Then what's the situation now? What's the hurry? Listen to me slowly. In any case, you can't help now." Looking at Feifei's lazy appearance, Emotienga sighed. Who's the master here? But although she was dissatisfied, she still put away the Vajra pills. Seeing that she didn't speak for a long time, and finally put away the medicinal pills, Jing Xingji asked, "What's wrong?" Emotienga shook her head. "I'll tell you later. Under normal circumstances in the current human world, it's impossible for anyone to pass the test of the vermilion bird's breath and become the vermilion bird bow's master. However, doesn't he have a young spiritual bead in his body? Even in the distant past era, this kind of miraculous object was a rare treasure. The power of the vermilion bird's breath was too great, so it stimulated the young spiritual bead and completely absorbed it. The vermilion bird's breath was trapped in the young spiritual bead, so its power was greatly reduced. That's why he survived. The young spiritual bead has long merged with him, and their breaths are the same. The vermilion bird bow and the vermilion bird's breath are constantly assimilated in the yang spiritual bead, which is equivalent to recognizing him as its master. After a pause, Fei Fei said with a bit of reluctance, "All right, his own breath is also very suitable. Pure yang body, Li fire aspect, and the vermilion bird bow." Li fire aspect. She was aware that Qin Shi had always been cultivating with fire element cultivation techniques. But what was the departing fire aspect? Did you forget his nascent soul celestial phenomenon? Mo Tiange was slightly stunned. She remembered the phoenix celestial phenomenon that appeared in the sky when they left Demonic Mountain that day. This matter even caused a sensation in the celestial pole. Phoenix is the vermilion bird. In fact, the vermilion bird is the noblest bloodline among the phoenixes. The human world is too chaotic now. You can't even distinguish the bloodline of a divine beast. Of course, divine beasts were too far away from them. They hadn't even seen a living creature, so how could they distinguish bloodlines? His nascent soul celestial phenomenon is a phoenix, which shows that he has the Li fire aspect, and the vermilion bird is the essence of Li fire, so they naturally match. What about now? Mo Tiange glanced at Qin Shi with a bit of worry. The flames on his body were burning fiercely. Will he be in danger? Probably not. The dangerous time has passed, Fei Fei said. Fei Fei said. After the yang spiritual beads absorbed the vermilion bird's breath, they began to compete with each other. From the looks of it now, the yang spiritual beads must have assimilated the vermilion bird's breath, so they released the vermilion bird's breath to transform his body. Mo Tiange was stunned for a while. So in the past half a year or so, he's actually been in danger? Yes. Fei Fei was a bit happy to see her like this. You just realized, if the yang spiritual bead didn't assimilate the vermilion bird's breath, even if his Dantian's injury was healed, it would have destroyed him in an instant. Mo Tiange touched her chest and glanced at Qin Shi. Fortunately, the danger has passed. After scaring her, Fei Fei seemed to have found her conscience, so she comforted her. You don't have to worry. This is a good thing. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, there will be fewer things that can hurt him in the future. Moreover, his real fire will become the vermilion bird's flame, which is more advanced than any heavenly fire or earthly fire. Even Samadhi real fire is inferior to it. Chapter 494. He's being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath. Mo Tiange said to Jing Xingji after learning what happened from Fei Fei. Jing Xingji was puzzled. How do you know? Mo Tiange paused for a moment. Fei Fei's ability to speak was indeed a bit surprising. In the current cultivation world, 8th-ranked demonic beasts only began to develop spiritual wisdom and could speak after learning. Fei Fei was only a 5th-ranked spiritual beast, but its spiritual wisdom wasn't inferior to that of humans. If this was known by others, Fei Fei would probably become a treasure coveted by everyone. Although Jing Xingji could be considered a trustworthy person in this immortal palace, this kind of thing. Just trust me. In the end, Mo Tiange didn't say it clearly. Fei Fei never spoke in front of Jing Xingji, and only communicated with her, using its divine comprehension, probably because it didn't want others to know. Jing Xingji didn't ask anymore, and turned to pay attention to Qin Shi's condition. He had been in the cultivation world for many years, so he knew he had to learn to keep his mouth shut when he shouldn't ask too many questions. The two of them just stood there, watching Qin Shi being surrounded by the vermilion bird's breath again, and slowly going through the process of body tempering. This process lasted for a full 3 days. At first, Jing Xingji was very concerned, but later, he became impatient. When he heard Mo Tiange said there was no danger, he returned to his previous habits and continued to meditate, practice swordsmanship, and go out for a walk every day. On the 3rd day, Mo Tiange saw that the flames on Qin Shi's body were getting weaker and weaker, but his face was getting redder and redder. She knew the body tempering process was about to be completed and was overjoyed. In this dim underground palace, although she lived peacefully for several months, she had been suppressing her emotions. Now she finally felt her mood brighten. Finally, after half a day, the flames on Qin Shi's body dimmed and finally extinguished completely. For more than half a year his face which had been unconscious for a long time, showed a slight fluctuation. After a while he opened his eyes. "Senior Marshal Brother." Emotinga's voice was hoarse when she finally saw him. Qin slowly turned his head and saw her at first glance, but he didn't say anything. He just gently reached out his hand and held it. Emotinga's eyes were slightly wet. She smiled, closed her eyes, and gently leaned her cheek on his hand, feeling this long-lost warmth. The silent warmth did not last long. After a series of cracking sounds, it turned out that it had jumped onto the tea table and swept the parts of the dolls to the ground. Then, it waved its tail and pointed its butt at them to show its dissatisfaction. Emotinga couldn't help but laugh. She blinked away the tears at the corners of her eyes. From beginning to end, Feifei didn't like Qin very much. Perhaps it was because of the pride of a divine beast that it had no choice but to recognize her as its master. Qin obviously had nothing to do with it, but it still had to put up with it. Qin also smiled. After regaining his consciousness and lying down for a while, he had already regained some of his spirit. Now that he sat up and slightly stretched his muscles and bones, he unexpectedly discovered that he was full of strength. He was a little surprised. Looking inside himself, he found that his dantian and meridians were very different from before. Even his body had become much tougher. Stretching out his hand, he seemed to have something more than usual. It was filled with vigor. Then he raised his head and looked around. He found that he was still in the Vermilion Bird main hall, but the layout of the surroundings seemed to be a temporary residence. What's going on? Qin was puzzled. He remembered that he was swallowed by the Vermilion Bird's breath. His meridians and dantian had to bear the Vermilion Bird's divine power. This kind of power was too strong. He thought he couldn't hold it anymore, and then he lost consciousness. Unexpectedly, when he woke up, he was still fine, even better than before. Emotinga was also fine. They were still in the Vermilion Bird main hall. No, the time when the passage to the Immortal Palace closed was already very close. Why were they still here? Emotinga, is the passage closed? He asked with a serious expression. Qin's question caught the key point. Emotinga nodded and said carelessly, "You've been in a coma for more than half a year. The passage to the Immortal Palace has long been closed." Really? Qin was only a little stunned when he heard this news. He was neither shocked nor panicked. Then he sighed softly. He was very clear about the situation before he was in a coma. It was already difficult for them to keep their lives with Jing Xingji alone. It was almost impossible for them to get out of the passage. Compared with their lives, what was the big deal about being locked in the Immortal Palace? If they were alive, they would have hope. He wasn't a disciple of a famous school who hadn't experienced setbacks. Although there weren't many obstacles in cultivating to the nascent soul realm, he had experienced a lot of hardships. His mental state had long been cultivated to the point of being indomitable. These thoughts flashed through his mind. His gaze fell on Emotinga, and he asked with concern, "How have you been in the past half a year? Did they make things difficult for you? What happened after that?" "What's wrong with me? You'll know just by looking at me." Emotinga smiled. As for what happened in the past half a year, Emotinga spent some time telling him everything that happened after he was in a coma. Juyan Sek's hopes were dashed. Master Taoist Iron Mask had no choice but to leave. Jing Xingji was implicated and injured. Guifeng Devil Monarch died. Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil technique. And finally, she told him about how he subdued the Vermilion Bird Bao due to the Yang spiritual bead, and how his body was transformed. "I see." Qin suddenly understood. "No wonder I found myself different from before as soon as I woke up." "Oh." Emotinga's eyes sparkled. "Did you make a realm breakthrough?" Upon seeing her expectant gaze, Qin couldn't help but laugh. "How could it be that easy? If I make a realm breakthrough, I'll be in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. However, in order to cross the South Sea that year, I forcibly increased my cultivation level and made a realm breakthrough. So my foundation was a bit shaky. I also got injured while crossing the South Sea. Although my cultivation level is still there are hidden dangers in my body. Just now, I discovered that my dantian is full, my meridians are strong, and even my body has become incomparably sturdy. Not only are the hidden dangers gone, but even my spiritual aura is also a lot more solid. Upon hearing this, Emotinga felt relieved. That's good. I was worried there would be some sequelae, but now, your previous big problem has been solved. Not bad. She was also very relaxed. I originally thought the injuries I suffered in the South Sea would take many years to recover, but now, it's a blessing in disguise. What about the vermilion bird bow? Since there were no problems with other things, Emotinga asked about this. Feifei said the yang spiritual bead has already assimilated the vermilion bird's breath, so the vermilion bird bow also recognized you as its master. Do you feel anything? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tried to use his spiritual aura to approach the yang spiritual bead inside his dantian. He knew the vermilion bird bow was inside the yang spiritual bead. Ever since he took the yang spiritual bead as his own, this bead had been continuously transforming his physique. However, due to the limitations of his cultivation level, the amount of spiritual aura he could use inside the yang spiritual bead was still very little. Half a day later, she shook his head. I can sense the vermilion bird bow, but I can't pull it out of the yang spiritual bead. I think it's probably because I haven't assimilated it enough. Although the yang spiritual bead has already fused with me, the spiritual aura it contains is too much. It's not something I can use right now. It was the yang spiritual bead that subdued the vermilion bird bow, not me. No matter which one it is, both of them are too powerful. If I want to control them, I have to slowly tame them. Even if a powerful treasure was subdued, it still wasn't easy to use it. Emotinga also understood this, so she didn't ask any more questions. In any case, he woke up, and it was a blessing in disguise. This was a good thing. The vermilion bird bow wasn't within her expectations. Fu Yaozi didn't tell her about the vermilion bird bow in the beginning, because he obviously knew it was impossible for them to obtain the vermilion bird bow with their cultivation levels. Now that the vermilion bird bow was subdued by Qinshi by accident, it was already a pleasant surprise. She couldn't use it for the time being, but she didn't need to worry too much. Qinshi seemed to understand what she was thinking. He reached out, pulled her into his arms, and said softly, "You've worked hard for more than half a year." During this time, although she didn't need to use her magical power or her wits, she was trapped in the dark underground palace with little hope. She didn't know the future, but she also had to worry about his injuries and plot a way to get out. If she didn't have a firm will, all these things together would be enough to crush her. At her side, there was only Jing Xingji, who seemed like a friend but wasn't very reliable, and a proud and awkward spiritual beast. There was no one to share her burden. Emotinga also hugged his waist. Feeling each other's body temperature intertwining, her nerves, which had been tense for more than half a year, suddenly relaxed. She closed her eyes and murmured, "I didn't work hard at all." None of this was a big deal. As long as there was hope in her heart, these psychological torments were nothing. She was no longer the orphan girl who had lost her parents, nor was she a little cultivator who was not steady enough and often made mistakes. She had a strong heart and a firm will. When he had an accident, she could stand up and bear everything. The two of them were affectionate when they suddenly heard a voice. "Huh, you're awake?" Jing Xingji had come back. Emotinga and Qinshi separated. Their attitudes were very natural, and they didn't feel embarrassed. They didn't do anything. Qinshi glanced at him and said, "I didn't expect you to still be alive." His tone was very flat, as if he was just stating a fact. But because of his flat tone, Jing Xingji was very unhappy. "Why can't I be alive? You're still alive." This Qin Shoujing really looked down on him out of habit. "Aren't you? An early-stage nascent soul cultivator dared to enter the immortal palace. You're already very brave. And you even fought against a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. It's really a miracle that you're still alive now." "Humph. If you were in my position, do you dare to say you wouldn't do that?" Jing Xingji wasn't polite at all. "You're only in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, but you dared to take your little lover and deal with a bunch of late-stage nascent soul cultivators. You're no less courageous than me. Also, if you weren't lucky enough to run into me, you too would have been killed already." What he said wasn't a lie. When Qin was unconscious after receiving the vermilion bird's breath. If Jing Xingji hadn't been by his side, Master Taoist Iron Mask definitely wouldn't have let them go. But Qin ignored the main point of Jing Xingji's words and only said, "Tiange isn't my little lover, she's my Dao companion." Jing Xingji held back for a long time. "Qin Shoujing you." Qin smiled then suddenly said, "Thank you very much. Although I really don't believe this is something you'd do." Jing Xingji was speechless. He even had to say thank you to provoke him. Chapter 495. Once Qin woke up, not only did Mo Tiange put down her psychological burden, but she could also do a lot of things. For example, Yang Qingji was also in the underground palace, and he was practicing prime demon technique. This was what Jing Xingji told Fei. But because she was worried about Qin she never went to see him. Now that Qin was awake, it was a good time to go and see the situation. Qin naturally went with her. He was also very curious about prime demon technique. This thing appeared in the Five Spirits Sacrifice Temple, and was extremely powerful. It definitely wasn't an ordinary technique, but he didn't know its origin. Fei led the way, and the two of them soon reached the place where the prime demon steel was. Compared to the Vermilion Bird main hall, the prime demon steel was located in a cave behind the sacrifice temple. The cave wasn't big, at most 100 feet deep. It was almost undecorated, as if it was just an abandoned cave carelessly opened during the construction of the sacrifice temple. The prime demon steel was located in the center of the cave, emitting a dense but restrained devil aura. The road leading to the cave was covered with corpses. These were demonic creatures formed due to the leakage of the prime demon aura. Some were demonic beasts and some were refined corpses. Right now, all the devil aura on their bodies have been sucked dry, turning them into dead creatures. There was a layer of restriction at the entrance of the cave. From Mo Tiange's perspective, this restriction had the power of at least a nascent soul cultivator, and it was very exquisite. It would be very difficult to break it. Next to the restriction at the entrance of the cave, Guifeng Demon Lord sat cross-legged. His pale face was even paler, and he was no longer breathing. In the depths of the cave, Yang Qingji sat cross-legged, completely unconscious. He was immersed in the devil aura, as if he was wholeheartedly trying to refine it. At first glance, Mo Tiange felt that Jing Xingji's judgment was correct. Guifeng Demon Lord's posture was obviously to maintain the restriction until he died of exhaustion. But the problem was that Guifeng Demon Lord was a late nascent soul cultivator. Although he didn't have much lifespan left, he had advanced to the late stage many years ago. He had great divine power, and was very powerful. Besides, the reason why nascent soul cultivators were hard to kill was because of their survival ability. Even if their bodies were destroyed, as long as their nascent souls were alive, they wouldn't die. Guifeng Demon Lord was only a body now. Did his nascent soul abandon its body, or did it die together? If he had abandoned his body, why would there be a nascent soul restriction here? If they were to die together, then what was the reason that he could not even care about his own life? Was it really to protect Yang Qingji? Mo Tiange and Qin glanced at each other, and saw the doubt in each other's eyes. "Senior brother, what do you think?" Qin muttered to himself for a long time before he finally shook his head. "It's hard to say. However, what's certain is that this brat is still in the core formation realm, so he's nothing to worry about. As long as Yang Qingji remained in the completion level, he and Jing Xingji could form an absolute suppression. Even if he advanced to the nascent soul realm, Qin was confident he could still kill him. Previously, he killed Mei Feng, who also cultivated the primordial devil art, and whose cultivation level was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange wasn't too worried about this. There was no direct conflict of interest between them and Yang Qingji. Instead, they were trapped in the immortal palace together. It could be said that they were in the same boat, and the possibility of cooperation was very high. But the problem was, do you think that the Ghost Square Demon Lord is really dead? Qin was a little stunned. "You mean?" "I'm just doubtful." Mo Tiange frowned and said, I really don't believe that a famous great cultivator in the late stage of the nascent soul realm would die like this. His body was still there, but his aura was completely gone. If he didn't die, he must have been possessed. Looking at Yang Qingji, who was wrapped in devil aura, Qingji pondered for a while and nodded slowly. Your worries aren't unreasonable. According to reason, the Ghost Square Demon Lord racked his brains to come to this immortal palace, to seek fated chances for the deification realm. How could he easily give up, unless he was at the end of the line? But it's completely unnecessary to say that he was possessed. You said the Ghost Square Demon Lord didn't have much time left in his lifespan, right? Yes. I once heard that even if he used all methods to extend his lifespan, the Ghost Square Demon Lord's lifespan wouldn't exceed 500 years. It's already not easy to find even one of those methods. According to common sense, his lifespan would be more than 100 years at most. That's right. Qingji said. The lifespan after possession is calculated by the age of the nascent soul. Even if the Ghost Square Demon Lord possessed someone, his lifespan couldn't be increased. But this guy is only in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Even if he practiced the primordial devil art, and his strength greatly increased, he could only reach the peak stage of the core formation realm in the near future. In more than 100 years, let alone the deification realm. Even if he successfully formed his nascent soul, could he cultivate to the late stage of the nascent soul realm? According to common sense, it's indeed impossible. In addition, unless it's absolutely necessary, I really don't understand why he would stay here instead of going out. Emotinga felt Qingji's words made sense. In this immortal palace, there was no way out. So what if he reached the deification realm? Did he really expect to cultivate to the void refinement realm and body integration realm, or break through the void here? Other people weren't like her, who received Fu Yaozi's inheritance and knew about the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation. However, the matter of the Ghost Square Demon Lord was indeed full of doubts. If they wanted to know the reason, they could only wait until Yang Qingji refined the initial devil aura and woke up. After looking at the situation, the two of them turned around. They couldn't enter the virtual sky world for the time being, but the two of them didn't care. In terms of spiritual aura, the spiritual aura in this underground palace wasn't bad. Moreover, there was still the remnant vermilion bird's breath, which was beneficial to Qingji's cultivation. The following days passed very comfortably. Emotinga still meditated and cultivated every day. In her spare time, she studied mechanical puppet techniques, while Qingji began to study ancient pill concocting techniques. Previously, they found the pill recipe for the deification pill in the scripture depository. The method of concocting this pill was very different from what it was now, and it even took a different path. Therefore, they could only study it again and slowly explore the ancient pill concocting techniques. The two of them also discussed how they should go in the future. First of all, it was an unchangeable fact that they were trapped in the underground palace. Although Emotinga learned the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation from Fu Yaozi, she couldn't use it now. At the very least, she had to figure out a feasible method after she formed her nascent soul. Second, if she wanted to form her nascent soul, she had to prepare a lot of things. The most important thing was to find a safe place. For Emotinga, the safest and most suitable place was the virtual sky world. Right now, they were trapped in the underground palace together with Jing Xingji. This secret couldn't be concealed, so they could only wait. Third, since they couldn't immediately enter closed-door meditation to form their nascent souls, they had to make some preparations first. For example, Emotinga had Emo Yaoqing's experience in cultivating the art of Sunu, and Fu Yaozi's experience in forming his nascent soul using the art of the origin. Both of them needed a long time to understand and analyze. As for medicinal pills and the like, Qingji also needed some time to concoct them. Therefore, the two of them decided that before they found a suitable way to avoid Jing Xingji's eyes and ears, they didn't have to rush into closed-door meditation. They should first make some preparations for forming their nascent souls. When the time came, they could immediately act. Jing Xingji returned from his swordsmanship practice. Seeing that they were busy, he couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing?" The bamboo bed Qin she used to rest on had been put away. A piece of animal skin was spread in the original corner, and a praying mat was placed there. In front of him was an exquisite pill furnace, and next to it was a short table filled with all kinds of spiritual panaceas and bottles. Qin she was concentrating on controlling the fire. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, his dantian real fire had turned into the vermilion bird's flame. It was very different from the past, and he was still adapting to it. Emotienga took some time to raise her head and glance at him. She said casually, "What else can I do? Keep messing around with this broken thing." "I'm not talking about this." Seeing that the two of them were so busy that they didn't have time to deal with other people, Jing Xingji shut his mouth. He looked over there. Although it was simple and crude, it had all the necessary tools and was neatly arranged. He then looked over at his own side. There was only a shabby praying mat and scattered sword-nurturing tools all around. Injustice suddenly arose in his heart, and evil rose from his guts. They were both trapped in the underground palace, so why was he Qin Shoujing, living so comfortably? Just as he was pondering how to make things a little uncomfortable for them, he suddenly saw a golden figure rushing in from the entrance of the hall. Fei Fei ran into the hall and jumped onto Emotienga's shoulder. That boy woke up. What? Emotienga stopped what she was doing. Fei Fei said with divine comprehension. That devil cultivator boy woke up. Really? Emotienga was pleasantly surprised. How's his situation? You'll know when you go and take a look. Emotienga pondered for a while, then pushed the things in her hands away. She looked up and said, Yang Qingji woke up. Should we go and take a look? Oh, Qin she was heating up the pill furnace. Upon hearing her words he stopped. What a coincidence. Exactly. Emotienga looked at Jing Xingji. Fellow Taoist Jing, let's go together? Jing Xingji had no choice but to give up the idea he just had. Let's go. 3 people and 1 beast soon arrived at the cave where the primordial devil steel was. The cave still maintained its original appearance. The restrictions at the cave entrance were still there, and Guifeng Devil Monarch's corpse was still sitting on the side. Yang Qingji, on the other hand, was already awake. With a dazed expression on his youthful face, he was kneeling next to Guifeng Devil Monarch. Fellow Taoist Yang, Emotienga called out. After a long time, Yang Qingji finally regained his senses. He raised his head and looked at them with doubt in his eyes. You. His voice was hoarse, and even his reaction became very slow. After a long time he finally asked, Why are you also here? Is the passage to the Immortal Palace not closed yet? He looked dazed, as if he didn't know how much time had passed. Seeing this, Emotienga became even more confused. She said, The passage to the Immortal Palace has been closed. We're trapped in the Immortal Palace. After a long time, Yang Qingji finally nodded slowly. Oh, his dazed appearance was abnormal no matter how one looked at it. Emotienga and Qin she glanced at each other. Emotienga asked tentatively, Fellow Taoist Yang, are you alright? Yang Qingji still looked at Guifeng Devil Monarch, his eyes flashing with many complicated emotions. In the end, he heaved a long sigh, stood up, and opened the restriction at the cave entrance. Fellow Taoist Qin seniors, please come in. His expression was tired, and his gaze was heavy. He didn't have the slightest sharpness of a youth in the past. On the contrary, he seemed a bit disheartened. Facing 2 nascent soul cultivators, he actually opened the restriction without any precaution. No matter how they looked at it, it was abnormal. The 3 people saw it and were astonished. After Yang Qingji opened the restriction, he returned to the side of the primordial devil steel and sat down. His voice was tired. Feel free to ask whatever you want. Chapter 496. All of them were cultivators, so they didn't care about hospitality. The 3 of them entered the cave and randomly chose a place to sit down. Before entering, Emotienga quickly scanned the cave, but didn't find any restrictions. When she turned around, she saw that Yang Qingji was still in a trance. Not to mention Qin Shi and Jing Xingji, even she could easily kill him. She felt she was being a bit too careful. But there was no harm in being careful. Besides, this matter was so strange that she couldn't be sure this Yang Qingji was the real Yang Qingji. After thinking for a while, she said, "Fellow Taoist Yang, what happened to you? Your master." Yang Qingji fiddled with the sky-reaching tower in his hand. His eyes were empty, and he didn't look at them. "As you can see, my master has fallen." This matter was right in front of them. They knew it without saying anything. But the inside story obviously wasn't simple. After a moment of silence, Yang Qingji looked up and smiled. "Fellow Taoist Qin." "Oh no, I forgot. Qin Wei isn't your real name. I should call you fellow Taoist Mo now." His gaze lightly swept over Qin Shi and Jing Xingji. There was neither vigilance nor reverence in his eyes. "Are you doubting whether my master really died or not?" They didn't expect Yang Qingji to say it so straightforwardly. Mo Tiange said, "If fellow Taoist Yang doesn't mind." Yang Qingji lowered his head to look at the demonic tower and said to himself, "You don't have to worry. My master has really fallen, and he was killed by me. There's no one here who can threaten you." Mo Tiange and Qin Shi looked at each other, feeling strange. He was killed by him. He was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, while Guifeng Devil Monarch was in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. How could he kill him? Could it be? Yang Qingji's gaze swept over them, and he showed a somewhat gloomy smile. "It seems you've guessed a little. Yes, my master intended to take over my body, but he was trapped by primordial devil aura, and was killed by my divine comprehension." With this short sentence, his expression was first sad, then determined and finally calm. This kind of calmness revealed a cold intent that sent chills down people's spines. Whether it was a mortal cultivation or demonic cultivation, killing or being killed was no big deal. On this path, even the cleanest person's hands were stained with human lives. Even between master and disciple, there were many who used and schemed against each other, but there were not many who truly had a master-disciple relationship. Nevertheless, Mo Tiange knew Guifeng Devil Monarch regarded Yang Qingji as his direct disciple. Along the way, he cared for Yang Qingji in every possible way. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they treated each other like father and son. Unexpectedly, "Little fellow Taoist," Jing Xingji said coldly, "your master's cultivation level is at the late stage of the nascent soul realm. Even early and middle stage cultivators like us are far inferior to a nascent soul realm cultivator. How could you kill him?" Jing Xingji was never one to sympathize with others. Even though Yang Qingji's mood was not right, his questions were still sharp. Yang Qingji smiled bitterly, but he had no choice but to answer. There were two nascent soul cultivators by his side, and he was only a core formation cultivator. If he didn't have a reasonable explanation, it would be easy for them to kill him. He said faintly, "Senior, you don't know, but Glorious Sky Demon Venerable sealed part of primordial devil aura inside the Heavenly Devil Tower. When Junior recognized Heavenly Devil Tower as its master, I refined this primordial devil aura for my own use. After entering the underground palace, my late master wanted to take this stone tablet away, but he triggered the restrictions inside. He had no choice but to lay a formation to slow down the devil aura, and then absorb it. Unfortunately, he underestimated the power of primordial devil aura. Seeing that his body couldn't bear it, and I was fine, at the last moment, he wanted to possess me. At this point, he paused and didn't continue speaking immediately. Mo Tiange more or less understood. Since he knew about the existence of the primordial devil stone tablet, Guifeng Devil Monarch's plan was to enter the underground palace, seize the primordial devil stone tablet, and use it to enter the deification realm in one go. In the beginning, he didn't have the thought of possessing Mo Tiange. Later, when something happened, he just wanted to take the primordial devil aura for his own use. However, when danger really came, he still attacked his disciple for the sake of his own life. From the perspective of human nature, this was a very natural reaction. His previous concern for Yang Qingji wasn't necessarily fake, because it was a fact that he didn't have much time left in his lifespan. With Guifeng City around, he definitely needed to find a successor, and Yang Qingji was the successor he chose himself. However, in a critical moment when his life was in danger, as long as there was a glimmer of hope, he would want to grasp it. even if he only had a lifespan of 100 years, and it was impossible for him to advance to the deification realm in these 100 years, after possessing Emotienga's body. The fear of death made him have no time to think about this. It was good enough that he could live for more than 100 years. It was no wonder they saw Guifeng demon monarch's body, maintaining the position of the restriction at the entrance of the cave. He had been fighting against the surging primordial devil aura. In the end, he couldn't resist it anymore, and his nascent soul left his body to possess Yang Qingji. Under normal circumstances, I definitely wouldn't be able to resist it, but primordial devil aura was too powerful. His nascent soul was slowly corroded, and its power gradually weakened. And because I refined heavenly devil tower, primordial devil aura wouldn't reject me. In the end, his divine consciousness was destroyed by me instead. Yang Qingji looked at them. Seniors, do you have any more questions? He didn't explain it in detail, but he had explained the general situation. The details might involve the secrets of their master-disciple relationship, so he couldn't go into details. According to common sense, it was really inconceivable for a middle-stage core formation cultivator to use his divine consciousness to destroy the nascent soul of a late-stage nascent soul great cultivator. However, there were exceptions to everything. The three of them had experienced the terror of primordial devil aura. If Guifeng demon monarch's nascent soul was really trapped and corroded by primordial devil aura, it wasn't impossible for it to be devoured. Emotienga looked at the other two people. Qinshi muttered to himself for a while, then nodded lightly. Jing Xingji didn't say anything. Emotienga had an idea of what was going on based on their reactions. She asked, then fellow Taoist Yang, what's your next plan? What other plan could I have? Yang Qingji's expression was already calm. He sighed and said, naturally, I'll continue living. He raised his head and looked at the three of them. Fellow Taoist Mo, you said the passage to Immortal Palace is closed. Presumably, we're all trapped in Immortal Palace? Correct. There was nothing to hide. The passage to Immortal Palace has been closed for more than half a year. None of us can get out. Yang Qingji nodded slightly, then asked, judging from your expressions, you seem to have a plan? Is there anything I can do? Upon hearing what he said, Emotienga gave Yang Qingji a meaningful look. From their previous dealings, she could see that Yang Qingji rarely interacted with people and lacked calmness when dealing with people. However, from what he said, she could tell that he was actually quick-witted and very smart. Among the three of them, there were two nascent soul cultivators. Although Yang Qingji absorbed primordial devil aura, his cultivation level was only in the core formation realm. In front of them, it was impossible for him to be on equal footing. His words naturally put himself together with them. Not only did he point out that his situation was the same as theirs, but he also expressed his willingness to advance and retreat together with them. It seemed he opened the restriction without any precaution in the beginning, not because he was overly sad, but because he wanted to express his attitude. With your current cultivation level, it's still too early to say that, Jing Xingji said bluntly. Since you obtained the Great Primordial Devil Technique, you must have a chance to form your nascent soul, right? You know about the Great Primordial Devil Technique? After a moment of surprise, Yang Qingji returned to normal. Yes, fellow Taoist Mo obtained Senior Fu Yaozi's inheritance, so it's not strange that you know about the Great Primordial Devil Technique. He paused for a moment, then answered, yes, this devil technique is extraordinary. If there are no accidents, forming your nascent soul is inevitable. How much time do you need? This? Yang Qingji pondered for a moment, then said, at least 20 to 30 years. That fast? Jing Xingji couldn't believe it. He was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm now. Even if he rushed to the late stage because of this fated chance, reaching the peak stage of the core formation realm and successfully forming his nascent soul in 20 to 30 years was still an incredible speed. For ordinary people, entering closed-door meditation to form their nascent soul would take at least 3 to 5 years to dozens of years. Yang Qingji smiled and said, Senior, you don't know much about devil cultivators, right? We devil cultivators aren't like you Dao cultivators. We rarely encounter bottlenecks and don't have to worry about unstable foundations. So if we cultivate wholeheartedly, we'll advance very quickly. Of course, the drawback is that we'll easily be possessed by the devil, and our divine abilities might not be able to keep up. But Junior has the heavenly devil tower, and this primordial devil art is very mysterious, so advancing to the nascent soul realm shouldn't be a problem for Junior. Nie Wuxiang also tried to refine primordial devil aura for dozens of years, but she still couldn't succeed. However, her situation was different from Yang Qingji's. Yang Qingji was basically a devil cultivator, so he refined part of primordial devil aura from the beginning. Nie Wuxiang, on the other hand, was a martial cultivator and also a Dao cultivator. The devil spirits in her body were intertwined, so it was very troublesome for her to refine primordial devil aura and turn into a devil cultivator. That being the case, Yang Qingji's words were very credible. Yang Qingji's gaze fell on Emo Tiange again. Fellow Taoist Emo, does that mean you really have a way to get out? If I form my nascent soul, will I be qualified to be your companion? Emo Tiange paused and didn't answer directly. Is this fellow Taoist Yang's choice? What else can I do? Yang Qingji smiled bitterly again. Master is dead and the passage to the immortal palace is closed. Even if my cultivation level greatly improves, what can I do by myself? No matter how high my cultivation level is, or how many treasures I obtain, I still have to get out. Since he spoke so frankly, Emo Tiange felt there was no need to probe further. Seeing that Qin Shi and Jing Xingji didn't have any objections, she said, "All right. Since fellow Taoist Yang is so frank, we'll be frank. It's not that we don't have a way to get out, but it's still too early to say. At the very least, both of us have to advance to the nascent soul realm. Otherwise, it'll just be empty talk." Yang Qingji was already mentally prepared for this. He nodded and said, "I understand. Next, I'll enter closed-door meditation here, until I advance to the nascent soul realm." Emo Tiange secretly heaved a sigh of relief when she heard his attitude. She had studied the mysterious void cloud formation. At least 5 mediums were needed, but there were only 4 living people in the immortal palace. They still had to find a way to deal with the last one. If Yang Qingji didn't cooperate with them, it would be even more troublesome. But now Yang Qingji took the initiative to become their companion, so there was one less problem to solve. Chapter 497. The majestic immortal palace was snow-white and shrouded in immortal aura, making it look like a fairyland. Unfortunately, this beautiful immortal palace lacked a bit of liveliness. It was quiet, deathly still. It had been silent for more than 100,000 years. At the moment when the world changed, it was torn from heaven and earth, and became an independent place that no one knew about. For more than 100,000 years, only the scorched black refined corpses occasionally broke the silence in the immortal palace. Suddenly, a golden figure flashed across the silence like a bolt of lightning. Left, following behind the golden figure, was a life-size puppet. Its face and details were carved a bit crudely, but its joints were exquisite and extremely flexible. What was even more peculiar was that this puppet emitted a powerful aura that was comparable to that of a core formation cultivator. This golden figure was a spirit beast with golden fur all over its body. It looked like a leopard cat, and had a pair of black eyes that scanned its surroundings cleverly. The puppet obediently went to the left. This was a small medicinal garden. After a long time, most of the restrictions had lost their effectiveness, but some still remained. After being blocked by the restrictions, the puppet raised its hand. The ancient green lamp in its hand emitted light, and broke the remaining restrictions with a bang. After that, the puppet and the spirit beast swaggered into the herb garden, and plucked the rare spirit herbs that were still in good condition. They either put them into the spirit beast storage space, or the cosmos sack hanging on the puppet's body. After that, they left the medicinal garden, and continued to search in the immortal palace. Emo Tiange poured out a pile of miscellaneous things from the Qianquan bag. She glanced at them, picked up a few useful things, and put the useless ones away. Then, she hung the empty Qianquan bag back on the puppet's body. Without her command, the puppet stood there obediently and didn't move. She glanced at Feifei next to her. After deciding to stay here for a while, it automatically arranged a nest for itself next to the low table. It used the fur of top-grade demonic beasts, padding layer after layer. It was very comfortable. At this moment, Feifei was squatting in its nest, slowly combing its golden fur. Sensing her gaze, it glanced back and continued to do its own thing. I say, as a spiritual beast, why doesn't it have any self-awareness? Emo Tiange lightly tapped the table and cast a sidelong glance at it. Feifei yawned and lay on the ground lazily. She replied telepathically, "If you want me to work, I'll have to pay you for it, right?" Emo Tiange eventually shook her head and sighed helplessly upon seeing how it acted, as if it was only a matter of course. Forget it. She already knew what kind of character this spiritual beast had. Although it called her master, it had never treated her as a servant. Divine beasts had to have their own pride. It had been 4 years since the passage to the immortal parting palace was closed. The 4 of them had been trapped in the underground palace. Yang Qingji had been cultivating in closed-door meditation in the cave, where the prime devil steel was located. Jing Xingji had also been diligently cultivating his swordsmanship to improve his cultivation level. As for Emo Tiange and Qin Shi, they had been cultivating day after day, studying the art of engineering and the art of pill concocting. 4 years had passed, and Qin Shi had already grasped the basics of ancient pill concocting techniques. However, deification pills were still far away from him. Not to mention that a few of the spirit herbs were hard to find, since they were pills that could help soul formation cultivators. They would be top-notch even in the entire mortal world. How could it be that easy to make? For this reason, Qin Shi put aside the art of pill concocting for the time being. In any case, he was still far from the deification realm. Even Lord Taoist Jinyang and Lord Taoist Jinghe, who were already in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, would need at least several hundred years to cultivate to the peak stage of the late stage. Emo Tiange, on the other hand, was on the verge of forming her nascent soul and needed a lot of medicinal pills. It was time to start concocting. As for Emo Tiange, she hadn't wasted the past 4 years. First of all, she had memorized Emo Yaoqing's cultivation experience and Fu Yaozi's soul formation experience. She was already prepared for soul formation. As long as the conditions were right, she could enter closed-door meditation at any time. In addition, her biggest progress was the art of engineering. Now she could make core formation puppets. After recognizing them as masters with her divine sense, she could send them to the underground palace to handle affairs. Seeing that she really made core formation puppets, Jing Xingji was extremely envious. But on second thought, he had nothing to regret. Although Emo Tiange didn't mean to hide it from him, he didn't have the materials to make puppets, nor did he have that many crystal soul jades to practice with. As for crystal jade, what a joke. How could he be willing to use that kind of treasure to make puppets? Crystal soul jades weren't enough to make core formation puppets, so he usually used crystals. However, Emo Tiange didn't have many crystals. She only had a dozen or so pieces, which were found in the Qinquan bags of those core formation ancient cultivators when they were adventuring. Therefore, she only made 3 core formation puppets in total. If she wanted to make more, she would have to use crystals. After making core formation puppets, Emo Tiange began to study the jade bone puppet technique, while letting Feifei take the puppets out of the underground palace to search for treasures left behind in the immortal palace. Feifei was very clever. In the past few years, it had been out of the underground palace many times, so it had long been familiar with the terrain of the immortal palace. It clearly knew where there were refined corpses and restrictions, so it was most suitable to take the puppets to search for treasures. However, Feifei's shortcoming was that Feifei was too clever. It wasn't an honest Xiaofan that did what it was told. Not only did it often act on its own, but it also kept things to itself. Whenever it saw something it liked, it would put it into its storage space and never take it out. Most high-level spiritual beasts had their own unique storage space, which was usually located in their abdomen, where other people couldn't reach it. If they wanted to take out the things inside, they would have to kill it, cut off its abdomen, and make it into a Qinquan bag. Emotienga naturally wouldn't do that. She wasn't a stingy person. There were so many spiritual plants in the virtual sky world, and she let them eat them all, let alone these things. During this time, the core formation puppets in Feifei had searched for a lot of good things in the Immortal Palace. Needless to say, except for the special ones that she transplanted into the virtual sky world, the rest went into Feifei's pocket. What they did most often was to search for the relics of ancient cultivators in the Immortals' caves left behind. This kind of thing was most suitable for puppets. They weren't afraid of injuries or restrictions, and they carried the prohibition-breaking magic weapons Qin she refined to imitate the peak-setting lantern, so they were almost always successful. Nevertheless, the treasures they could obtain were limited. Relics of ancient cultivators were the most common and easiest wealth to obtain in the Immortal Palace. Two groups of people came to this Immortal Palace. One group was the 5 saints from 100,000 years ago, and the other group was the nascent soul cultivators who came with them. The 5 saints didn't care about them. They spent a lot of time looking for fated chances, so they didn't take many relics of ancient cultivators this time. However, there were many people who came to explore the Immortal Palace 4 years ago. These people weren't like them, who had the inheritance of the 5 saints and knew where the real fated chances were. Once they entered the Immortal Palace, they could only search everywhere. What they searched the most was naturally the Immortals' caves of these ancient cultivators. Most of the relics were taken away by them. As for the deification ancient cultivators' caves, they were 2 obvious targets. Almost all of them were cracked by those nascent soul cultivators, so they naturally didn't leave many treasures behind. However, in any case, the Immortal Palace was an immortal palace. Even if the big fish had been taken away, the remaining small fish and shrimps couldn't be underestimated. After all, the present was different from the past. In the Middle Ages cultivation world, resources were abundant. There were many things that cultivators didn't take seriously at that time, but now they were rare natural treasures. In this half a year, the combination of the core formation puppet and Feifei almost plundered the entire Immortal Palace, accumulating an astonishing amount of wealth for Emotienga. After putting everything away, Emotienga turned around and found that Qin she wasn't cultivating or concocting medicinal pills. Instead, he was staring at the puppet lost in thought. "What's wrong?" she asked. Qin she regained his composure and answered, "I'm thinking about that deification refined corpse." "Is there a problem?" That refined corpse wandered in the Immortal Palace, making it difficult for them to leave the underground palace. However, the gap between their cultivation levels was too big, so they couldn't do anything about it. "If that refined corpse isn't here, we can leave the underground palace. At that time, we'll find an immortal's cave, and you can enter closed-door meditation to form your nascent soul." Emotienga naturally thought about this matter. If she wanted to enter closed-door meditation, the trouble was that it was inconvenient to hide in the underground palace, and it would be easy for her to expose herself. In addition, she wasn't ready to form her nascent soul yet, so she wasn't in a hurry. Now that the medicinal pills for forming her nascent soul were almost ready, and she also remembered all her experiences, it was indeed time to think about entering closed-door meditation to form her nascent soul. However, that refined corpse's cultivation level was too high, so they really couldn't think of a way to deal with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come up with that trick of letting the puppet out of the underground palace to look for treasures. "That's right, but what can we do? That refined corpse is in the deification realm. If we encounter it, we have no choice but to run." "That's what I was thinking," Qin she said slowly. "But I just thought of something that might be feasible." "What is it?" Emotienga was shocked. If they could deal with this refined corpse, they could leave the underground palace without any worries, and many things would be easily solved. "I remember you know how to set up a formation to isolate aura, right?" Emotienga pondered for a moment. There was indeed such a record in the Xuanji formation book. However, a formation to isolate aura wasn't very useful normally, and it was quite troublesome to set it up. Moreover, the refined corpse's cultivation level was too high, so it wasn't practical to use this formation to trap it. Just as she was about to say something, Qin raised his hand and stopped her. He continued, "First of all, we can try to find out the pattern of this refined corpse's wandering. For example, if we lead it into a sealed valley, will it wander around in the valley? When it chased people, the refined corpse could fly, but when it wandered around, they didn't see it fly." Thinking of this, Emotinga's eyes brightened, and she continued to stare at Qin. "If that's really the case, we can lead it into a sealed space. Then we can set up a formation to isolate aura around it. Although this formation might not have much effect on deification realm cultivators, it should be able to reduce the range in which it can sense aura. Right? As long as we don't get close to that range, we'll be safe." Emotinga's eyes became brighter and brighter. Yes, a formation to isolate aura might not be 100% effective on a refined corpse, but it would have some effect. As long as the range wasn't too wide, they could live outside the range with peace of mind. But isn't it too dangerous to lure it to a certain place? Yes, it's precisely this problem that can't be solved, so I never mentioned it. But it's different now. Qin's gaze fell on the puppets. "You can already make core formation puppets, so we can use them as bait." Emotinga hesitated for a moment. "But these puppets don't have aura." "Use illusionary talismans," Qin said. "These talismans aren't difficult to draw. Give me some time, I can draw them." Chapter 498. After learning of their plan, Jing Xingji became excited. Both Emotinga and Qin were quiet people. Although being trapped in the underground palace was a bit uncomfortable, it wasn't like they couldn't endure it. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, was different. Aside from meditating and practicing his swordsmanship, what he loved the most was strolling around. Sometimes he would just stroll around the underground palace, but sometimes he would take risks and leave the underground palace. Because of the existence of that refined corpse, he had to be very careful every time he left the underground palace. It was very unpleasant. Now that there was a way to trap the refined corpse, he was very proactive. For the sake of this plan, the three of them had made many preparations. Emotinga spent a lot of money and used crystal jades to make many core formation realm puppets. Needless to say, Qin was drawing illusory spiritual talismans every day. As for Jing Xingji, he went everywhere with Fei to look for suitable locations. Fei was very familiar with the Immortal Palace, so she quickly selected a few locations for Jing Xingji to investigate. Obviously, this on-the-spot investigation was the most dangerous part, but it was also the part that didn't require any capital. Jing Xingji muttered a few words, then obediently went. Who asked him to not know how to use mechanisms or draw talismans? Moreover, he was reluctant to part with those crystal jades, so he might as well sell his labor. After several months, they finally decided on a valley. This valley was located at the very edge of the restriction of the Immortal Palace. It occupied a large area, but the spiritual qi was not strong. There were only a few deserted caves scattered around. Jing Xingji went in and explored it. It should be the residence of some low-level cultivators, and there were not too many valuable things. Most importantly, this valley was naturally closed, and there were cliffs on both sides. There was no need to modify it, and it could be used. By this time, Emotinga had already made more than 10 puppets, spending a lot of crystal jades on them. These puppets were used to lure the refined corpse, so it was impossible to retrieve them. However, in order to get out of the underground chamber, Zhang Xian couldn't care less about these losses. She had already obtained enough things from the Immortal Palace. Losing some was nothing. Qin's illusionary talisman was rather difficult. He had only begun to learn the art of talisman crafting when he was in the core formation realm. Although he was rather talented, it wasn't that easy to make high-level illusionary talismans. In order to raise the grade of the illusionary talisman, he put down everything and focused on crafting talismans. After wasting a lot of talisman paper and beast blood, when he was almost out of materials, he finally managed to draw enough illusionary spirit talismans for his use. Everything was ready, and the corpse trapping operation finally began. At the exit of the underground palace, Fei Fei poked her head out and looked around. After making sure that there was no danger, she carefully crawled out. Behind him, Jing Xingji muttered, "Are you sure the refined corpse isn't nearby? It would be terrible if this entrance was discovered." Fei Fei raised her head and bit the hem of his sleeve to show her dissatisfaction. Then she turned around and led the way. Emo Tiange and Qin Shi were next. Although they could control the puppets in the underground palace with their divine senses, it was still better for them to do it themselves. 3 humans and 1 beast had concealment talismans stuck on their bodies. Under Fei Fei's lead, they soon found the refined corpse. The refined corpse was wandering along the mountain path. When it came to a dead end, it would randomly change directions. The 3 of them observed it for a while, but all they saw was that it didn't know how to cross the obstacles. "Have you chosen your route?" Jing Xingji asked. Emo Tiange nodded, then took out the puppets one by one from her Qingquan ring. These puppets were lined up in a row, and there were more than 10 of them. Each of them was the size of a real person, and they stood there quietly. Emo Tiange then took out more than 10 crystal jades from her robe and opened the abdomen of the puppets. There was a small groove inside which a crystal jade could be inserted. Jing Xingji's eyes were filled with envy. "So many crystal jades. You're really willing to?" Emo Tiange rolled her eyes at him. "I'm not willing to. Take them out." Jing Xingji immediately shut his mouth. He knew that some time ago, her spiritual beasts and puppets plundered the entire immortal palace. He even had a dark suspicion that the 2 of them had planned this beforehand. They only proposed this plan after they plundered all the good things in the immortal palace. When the time came, they would deal with the refined corpse, leaving him with some leftovers. However, he only thought about it in his heart. In any case, it was Emo Tiange who had this method. He didn't have a clever spiritual beast, didn't know how to make puppets, and he was even more reluctant to give up crystal jades. He could only accept his bad luck. After the crystal jades were inserted, the more than 10 unconscious puppets suddenly changed and emitted the aura of a core formation cultivator. Emo Tiange said, 5 puppets per person. That won't be a problem, right? To control these puppets, they needed to use their divine sense to set restrictions. The stronger their divine sense was, the more puppets they could control. Although she had the soul refining art, her accuracy wasn't enough to control more than 10 puppets at once. After the 3 of them controlled the puppets, Qin Shi took out a stack of illusionary talismans and distributed them to each puppet. Controlling the puppets to use the talismans was a bit difficult. Fortunately, their divine senses weren't weak and they'd tried it many times, so it wasn't a big problem. After making all the preparations, Emo Tiange took a deep breath and said, "I'll go first." She took a step forward, and with a move of her divine sense, the puppet next to her flew up lightly. The puppet landed next to the refined corpse, but the refined corpse didn't notice it at all. This puppet only had slight spiritual aura fluctuations and didn't have any vitality, so it couldn't attract the refined corpse's attention at all. Emo Tiange controlled the puppet and slowly widened the distance between it and the refined corpse. Jing Xingji took the risk to test this distance. The refined corpse could sense vitality within a radius of several miles. When it was almost there, the puppet moved its fingertips, and an illusionary talisman was ignited. The instantaneous movement attracted the refined corpse's attention. The refined corpse, which had been wandering for several years, finally found a target. It stomped its feet and chased after the puppet. With the fluctuations from the burning illusionary talisman on its body, the puppet quickly fled in the direction of the valley, according to its original route. However, the speed of a core formation puppet was limited. It only persisted for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before the refined corpse caught up and smashed it into pieces. Upon seeing this, Emo Tiange immediately sent out a summoning talisman. During this time, Qin Shi had already controlled the puppet to the predetermined location. As soon as he received the summoning talisman, he also let the puppet activate an illusionary talisman and continued to run along the predetermined route. Jing Xingji, on the other hand, had already taken the puppet to the next location. The 3 of them divided the work like this. As soon as they received the summoning talisman, They activated the illusionary talisman and controlled the puppet to run along the predetermined route towards the valley. When it was overtaken, it immediately sent a summoning talisman to the next person and then rushed to the next location. The whole thing wasn't difficult, but it required a high degree of tacit understanding between the three people. If there was a slight mistake, the refined corpse might deviate from the predetermined route and mess up the steps. This also required a high level of divine sense from the three people. Controlling 5 puppets wasn't a simple matter in itself. They also had to rush to the right location at the right time and activate the illusionary talisman at that moment to try to prolong the time it took for the refined corpse to catch up. Nevertheless, they were well prepared and had experimented several times before. Occasionally, accidents happen, but they managed to pull the refined corpse back to the predetermined route in time. The first puppet, the second puppet. One puppet after another was smashed by the refined corpse, and the distance between the refined corpse and the valley was getting closer and closer. Finally, the last puppet Emotienga controlled reached the edge of the valley and jumped down. The refined corpse chased after it, and also followed it without any hesitation. When the 3 people and 1 beast met outside the valley, Emotienga shouted, "Set up the formation!" Feifei immediately turned around and ran while taking out high-grade spirit stones from its storage space. With several popping sounds, it inserted the spirit stones into the formation that had already been set up. Buzz! With a clear sound, several clear lights lit up the surroundings of the valley and shot towards the center. The clear lights converged above the valley and instantly turned into a transparent shield, covering the entire valley. Seeing that the formation was activated, Emotienga breathed a sigh of relief and looked down. With the concealment talisman on them, the refined corpse couldn't sense their existence at this distance, so they could observe the situation without worry. The puppet she controlled was smashed by the refined corpse's claw when it fell into the valley. At this moment, the refined corpse that had lost its target was wandering in the valley. The 3 people observed it attentively. Although they successfully led the refined corpse into the valley, they still had to see if it really wouldn't fly out of the valley before it could be considered a success. This refined corpse's cultivation level was too high. The formation outside the valley could only isolate part of its aura and make its senses slow, but it couldn't prevent it from leaving the valley or seal its ability to sense aura. An hour later, the refined corpse touched the mountain wall and turned in another direction, showing no intention of flying out of the valley. The 3 people finally relaxed their tense nerves. This was a deification realm refined corpse. If anything went wrong, they would lose their lives. We're finally safe. Jing Xingji wiped the sweat from his forehead. Yes, we can move out of the underground palace. Emotienga looked up at the immortal palace and sighed. Living outside is much more comfortable than living in the underground palace. After they finished talking, they turned around and saw that Qin was still observing the valley attentively. What are you doing? Still worried? Jing Xingji patted his shoulder. Qin shook his head and didn't answer. Instead, he controlled the remaining puppet to jump down. This puppet didn't activate the illusionary talisman, so the refined corpse turned a blind eye to it. It easily approached the refined corpse. The valley was very deep. Even cultivators couldn't clearly see the scene below, so they could only sense it with their divine senses. Sensing that Qin was controlling the puppet to touch the refined corpse's right hand, Emotienga suddenly understood. The interspatial ring. This refined corpse was originally a deification realm cultivator, so it naturally had an interspatial ring. After it became a refined corpse, no one dared to approach it, so the interspatial ring was intact on its hand. Almost all the Immortals' caves of the deification realm cultivators in the Immortal Palace had been searched, so this interspatial ring might be the only intact one. Realizing what Qin was doing, Jing Xingji became excited. Quick, get that interspatial ring off. Let's divide the loot. Most of the items in the interspatial ring they got from Master Taoist Yuanmu had been taken away, but there were still so many treasures. If it was an intact interspatial ring, how many treasures would it contain? Qin didn't answer him. He was still focused on controlling the puppet. Finally, the puppet rubbed the interspatial ring off the refined corpse's hand. But at the same time, the refined corpse seemed to feel someone was disturbing it. It waved its arm, and the puppet shattered. The interspatial ring fell into the grass. Qinshi heaved a sigh of relief and turned to look at Jingxingji. What are you standing there for? Quickly pick it up. Out of the 15 puppets, only one was left under Jingxingji's control. Jingxingji surprisingly didn't object to his tone. He controlled the last puppet to jump down the valley and pick up the interspatial ring. Chapter 499. After picking up the interspatial ring and making sure the refined corpse wouldn't come out again, the 3 people and 1 beast returned to the underground palace. Sure enough, there were a lot of good things in the interspatial ring. Not to mention the high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades. There were medicinal pills, materials, magic weapons, and so on. After more than 100,000 years, the medicinal pills and spiritual plants had almost lost their spiritual aura and were of no value. Jingxingji picked some materials related to sword nurturing and gave the rest to Qinshi and Emotienga. The 3 of them divided the magic weapons equally. Even if they didn't need them, they could sell them for spirit stones. The cultivation technique jade slips could be duplicated, so each of them had 1 copy. Finally, there were the high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades. Since Jingxingji gave up most of the materials, he got some more. Finally, there was the interspatial ring. Emotienga and Qinshi already had it, so they gave it to Jingxingji. Unfortunately, they didn't find the token for the storehouse in the interspatial ring. However, even if they had the token, it would be difficult for them to enter again. The restriction outside the storehouse would automatically repair itself. In the past few years, it had already been restored to its original state. With their cultivation levels, it would be difficult for them to break it. In any case, the interspatial ring was already an amazing wealth. The 3 of them each got something. Not only did they make up for the corpse trapping operation, but they also made a lot of money. Everyone was happy. Then they put away the things, informed Yang Qingji, and left the underground palace. Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil art, so the most suitable place for cultivation was still the original cave. Therefore, he still did closed-door meditation in the cave, and didn't plan to go out. As for Emotienga, Qinshi, and Jingxingji, after leaving the underground palace, they found abandoned immortals' caves full of spiritual aura according to the demarcated safe area, and settled down separately. There was no shortage of immortals' caves full of spiritual aura in this immortal palace. The best ones were naturally those on isolated peaks. These immortals' caves originally belonged to deification cultivators. Several years ago, when they entered the immortal palace, the restrictions on the immortals' caves were almost cracked by those nascent soul cultivators, and the good things were basically swept away. They didn't have to spend much effort to repair the immortals' caves and rearrange the restrictions, then they could live there. Out of the 15 core formation puppets they worked hard to make, 14 were destroyed. Emotienga was very distressed. Later, she went to find the wreckage and repaired it. Emotienga put 2 of them into the virtual sky world to replace the 2 destroyed stone sculpture puppets. As for the other one, it stayed outside to serve tea and handle chores. Emotienga ordered the puppets to tidy up the main cultivation room. She was very satisfied when she looked at the neat and tidy immortals' cave. The cave they chose was located on the highest peak of the immortal palace. It was remote and very quiet. Once they left the cave, they could see the entire immortal palace. The scenery was extremely beautiful. The only drawback was that the spiritual chi here was slightly lacking, and the cave abode was also slightly smaller. No matter how small the cave abode was, it was still the residence of the sex deity transformation stage elders. It had all the necessary cultivation rooms. It was just that the disciples did not live in a big place. As for the spiritual chi, it was even more unnecessary. How could the spiritual chi in this immortal palace be lacking? Besides, once they left the underground palace, Missouri Tienga would enter closed-door meditation to form her nascent soul. so the two of them would definitely enter the virtual sky world. What happened outside didn't really matter. After she settled down, she didn't immediately enter closed-door meditation. Forming one's nascent soul wasn't a trivial matter. A little carelessness could lead to irreversible consequences. If she couldn't form her nascent soul when her core shattered, her 100 years of cultivation would go down the drain. Therefore, in addition to Mo Yaoqing and Fu Yaozi's cultivation experiences, Qin Shi also recalled the situation when he formed his nascent soul and carefully summarized some details for reference. As for Mo Tiange, she was comprehending her state of mind. When her state of mind was calm, and she was sure there were no mistakes, she would enter closed-door meditation again. A phoenix cry came from outside, followed by the breath of a spiritual beast. Mo Tiange stood up and went out of the cave. She saw Qin Shi feeding a dazzling bird medicinal pills. "Is this your dazzling bird?" The bird in front of her was about 3 feet long. Its whole body was red and bright like flames. Its long tail feathers were extremely gorgeous, very similar to a phoenix's tail. The most peculiar thing was that the bird had 2 eyeballs in each of its eyes, so it was called a dazzling bird. The dazzling bird was a very rare kind of spiritual beast. Not only was it good at using fire magic, but it also had extraordinary strength. Among spiritual beasts of the same rank, it was very powerful. According to ancient records, the dazzling bird had part of the phoenix's bloodline and was a branch of the divine beasts from the distant past era. It also had the effect of warding off evil. Mo Tiange remembered that Qin Shi obtained this dazzling bird when he was still in the foundation-building realm and had raised it for 200 years. However, like most cultivators, the spiritual beasts they raised couldn't keep up with their cultivation levels and couldn't help them in fights of magical power, so he rarely brought it with him. When she left, this dazzling bird was only in the 5th rank, but now it was already in the 7th rank. If it advanced again, it would be an 8th rank spiritual beast, which was equivalent to a nascent soul cultivator. Qin Shi fed the last beast spirit pill to the dazzling bird, then patted its head. The dazzling bird let out a cry, spread its wings and flew into the air. He said, "Thanks to the beast spirit pills you left behind, this dazzling bird advanced 2 ranks in more than 50 years. In a few dozen years, it'll probably advance to the 8th rank." Really? Looking at the dazzling bird flying in the air, she was very envious. It's really strange. Your dazzling bird can smoothly advance from the 5th rank to the 7th rank, but Fei and the others ate so many medicinal pills, but none of them advanced? Qin Shi smiled. Don't you think about how old they are? I've raised this dazzling bird for at least 200 years. Although I'm not as extravagant as you, I still fed it a lot of medicinal pills. How long have Fei and Xiaohua been with you? In my opinion, although spiritual beasts don't have as many bottlenecks as human cultivators, their lifespans are amazing, so they often need to accumulate energy for a long time. Maybe when they advance to the 5th rank, they need to accumulate energy. Look at Xiaofan the sea dragon. It's the oldest, but hasn't it already cultivated to the peak of the 5th rank? I reckon it can advance to the 6th rank soon. Mo Tiange thought about it and agreed. Although Fei and Xiaohua were spiritual beasts she got a long time ago, they had only cultivated for a little more than 100 years. As for Xiaofan, although it hadn't been with her for long, it was already more than 800 years old. It was usually the most well-behaved, unlike Fei and Xiaohua who dared to eat any spiritual plants. But among the 3 spiritual beasts, it cultivated the fastest. Presumably, Qin Shi's words about accumulating energy were somewhat reasonable. By the way, do you still remember the blood-eating vine? Speaking of spiritual beasts, Mo Tiange suddenly remembered this thing. When they first entered the Immortal Palace, they passed by a forest of blood-eating vines. Fu Yaozi said that these things fed on spiritual beasts, and were also great supplements for them. So they cut a lot of them, and put them in their qianquan bags. Of course I remember. I also plan to use this thing to try to help the dazzling bird advance to the 8th rank. You can also see if these blood-eating vines can help your spiritual beasts break through their bottlenecks. Without hesitation, the 2 of them took out the blood-eating vines they cut, and distributed them to their spiritual beasts. When the four spiritual beasts saw the blood-eating vines, they were like cats seeing fish. Their reactions were surprisingly similar, and they all pounced on them to eat. Emotienga was curious and asked Feifei, "Is this thing delicious?" Feifei nodded vigorously, while busily gnawing on it. It had always been very concerned about its image, so there weren't many times when it didn't care about its demeanor. She asked Xiaofan again, "Xiaofan, do you recognize this thing?" Xiaofan was more well-behaved than Feifei. Upon hearing her question, it stopped and answered, "I don't know, but it smells delicious. I feel comfortable eating it, and my spiritual aura circulates very fast." Oh, it seemed this was the intuition of spiritual beasts. "The three of you, don't eat too much at once," she warned them, and left the virtual sky world. Inside the cave, Qinshi was sitting in front of a table. Beside him were piles of medicinal pills, magic weapons, and sundries. There were also several Qingquan bags on the table. Upon seeing this, Emotienga raised her eyebrows. "What are you doing? You took out all your belongings?" Qinshi shook the Qingquan ring in his hand and said, "With this thing, I don't need a Qingquan bag anymore." They obtained a Qingquan ring from the deification ancient cultivator in the first cave on the top of ascetic cliff. Later, Master Taoist Yuanmu gave them another Qingquan ring during the negotiation. Together with the Qingquan ring in the hands of the deification refined corpse, they had exactly one Qingquan ring for each of Jing Xingji's group. Qingquan rings were many times more advanced than Qingquan bags. In the current cultivation world, the most advanced Qingquan bags were made from the fur under the belly of high-rank spiritual beasts. High-rank spiritual beasts had a unique storage space with a very large capacity. Ordinary Qingquan bags, on the other hand, were actually large bags sewn from animal skins and made to look very small using the technique of space. Qingquan rings were different. They were made using the distant past era space-tearing technique. The space inside was not only large but also independent. It was especially suitable for storing spiritual plants, medicinal pills, and other things that needed to preserve spiritual aura. Qingquan bags couldn't compare at all. Moreover, even if a restriction was placed on a Qingquan bag, it was very easy to remove. The Qingquan ring, on the other hand, was different. A more complicated restriction could be placed on it. If the cultivation level of the person who obtained it wasn't high enough, they couldn't open it. Unless the owner died, the restriction would weaken until it dissipated. Most importantly, how could taking things out of a Qingquan bag be more convenient than using a Qingquan ring? For high-rank cultivators like them, taking magic weapons out of a Qingquan bag would take time no matter how fast they were, and it would be easy for the enemy to see them. Qingquan rings, on the other hand, didn't need to be worn directly on their fingers. Their spiritual aura could move at will, and they could take out magic weapons unknowingly and catch the enemy off guard. The two of them obtained a lot of things from the Immortal Palace. Because Jing Xingji was beside them, they didn't have time to properly tidy them up. Now that they finally had an independent immortal's cave, it was a good time to take inventory. Seeing this, Emotienga also took out all her things from the Qingquan bag, tidied them up, and put them into the Qingquan ring. During this process, she discovered that the Qingquan bag could actually be directly put into the Qingquan ring. It was impossible to put a Qingquan bag into another Qingquan bag. However, the Qingquan ring was an independent space, so it could put a Qingquan bag inside. Such leisurely days passed by for several months. After Qinshi explained his soul formation experience to Emotienga one by one, the two of them tidied up, laid a formation restriction, and prepared to enter closed-door meditation. If there were no accidents, they wouldn't come out of closed-door meditation until Emotienga formed her nascent soul. It was unknown how long this process would take, maybe 3 to 5 years, maybe 10 years. During this time, with Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji here, someone had to preside over this immortal's cave outside. As for soul formation, they couldn't be careless. If there was a nascent soul cultivator by their side, it would be a lot safer. So Qinshi had to enter the virtual sky world. Fortunately, although Feifei was a spiritual beast, it was half as smart as a person. With its spiritual intelligence, It wouldn't be a problem to leave the immortals' cave to it. After a brief discussion, the two of them left the outside matters to Feifei and entered the virtual sky world. Chapter 500. The two of them already had experience with entering closed-door meditation in the virtual sky world to form their nascent souls. It had only been 60 to 70 years since the last time she advanced to the nascent soul realm, so the preparations this time were very easy. Mo Tiange laid a spirit-gathering formation around the closed-door meditation room. She had long finished concocting the medicinal pills she needed. They didn't have any special methods to increase their chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm, but the art of Sinew and Taiyuan record were top-grade cultivation techniques. Coupled with the environment of the distant past era in the virtual sky world, and the spiritual pills concocted from 10,000-year-old spiritual plants, their chances of advancing to the nascent soul realm were already very high. Tiange, after you enter closed-door meditation, don't try to form your nascent soul right away. First, carefully recall everyone's soul formation experiences and experience their realms. Once you understand everything, you can circulate your spiritual aura and try to break through to the nascent soul realm. Mo Tiange complied one by one. After she finished preparing everything, she entered the closed-door meditation room. She sat cross-legged in the seclusion room and activated the spirit-gathering array. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She still remembered when she formed his nascent soul. She once boasted shamelessly about how she had the aptitude that was hard to come by in 1,000 years, and the fated chance that was hard to come by in 10,000 years. So why couldn't she become the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the history of the celestial pole? Today, she was merely 160 years old. She was already at the peak of the completion level, and was about to break through to the original level. She smiled and stopped sighing in her heart. This sentence was actually just a joke. Although she was confident she could form her nascent soul, she never cared about the time. What was important about forming the nascent soul sooner or later? Ever since she set foot on the path to immortality, she never gave up on herself. Every step she took was steady, which was much more important than becoming the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the celestial pole. Concealing his spirit in qi, he calmed his mind and easily entered a meditative state. Everything around him was gone. Nothing could be seen, nothing could be heard, nothing could be felt. She felt as if she had returned to her mother's embrace. It was warm, serene, tranquil, until it disappeared. Gradually, even his heart melted in this kind of nothingness. He couldn't find himself, yet he was everywhere. Where am I? She asked herself, but her surroundings were empty, as if even time and space did not exist. This kind of nothingness that didn't even exist was so frightening when she was awake. Everyone encountered different situations when they tried to form their nascent soul. He didn't know what Mo Tiange's mental state had experienced, but he knew he couldn't intervene. If she couldn't even pass the initial mental state, there was no need for her to form her nascent soul. She'd already failed. On the path of cultivation, aura refining was the rudiments, foundation building was the threshold, and core formation was the initial success. Only when one formed their nascent soul could they be considered to have truly set foot on the path of immortality and come into contact with the true meaning of immortality. Therefore, to break through to the nascent soul realm, aptitude was no longer that important. Cultivation level, temperament, and personal understanding were more important. Because of this, even those disciples of famous cultivation groups with great cultivators as their backing could only use medicinal pills to reach the core formation realm at most. They couldn't cross the hurdle of forming their nascent soul. Only by comprehending the profound meaning of immortality could one become a true great cultivator. What is the path of immortality? To seek power and not be controlled by others. A woman appeared in Mo Tiange's mental state and said faintly. She had a dignified appearance and a calm expression. She was just casually standing there, but she was already astonishingly beautiful. She was Mo Yaoqing, born in Danxia sect in Yunzhong 5,000 years ago. She had a pure Yin constitution, and her talent and beauty were equally astonishing. Beauty and pure Yin constitution. These two perfectly combined on her body, causing her a lifetime of misfortune. No one saw the overflowing talent beneath her superior aptitude, and no one saw the firm Tao heart behind her beauty. In order to escape her fate, she crippled her own cultivation level and started from zero. She put in 10 times, or even 10 times the effort and hardships of others to enter the nascent soul realm. Emotienga recalled herself. She was once an ignorant child, but because of a sentence she inadvertently said, she was kidnapped. When she was young, a moment of carelessness not only brought disaster to herself, but also implicated innocent people. What is the path of immortality? To seek power and not be controlled by others. What is the path of immortality? To seek longevity and to explore the true meaning of the world. This time, a vague figure appeared. His face couldn't be seen clearly, and his figure couldn't be distinguished. Only his clear and quiet voice could be heard. This was Fu Yaozi, the #1 cultivator in Yunzhong for more than 100,000 years. He was a maverick individual cultivator, a legendary genius cultivator, who advanced into the deification realm. In his life he didn't have many misfortunes, but he was full of ups and downs, and every step he took was extremely difficult. He was considered to have a waste spiritual root, had no wealth, and had no backing. He could only rely on his own 2 legs to advance step by step on the path of immortality. But even so, he never gave up. From an insignificant little aura refining cultivator, he went through countless difficulties and dangers, successfully built his foundation, and entered the threshold of the cultivation world. Later, he obtained an incomplete art of the origin. Relying on his firm Tao heart and intelligence, he advanced step by step on the path of immortality. But after he became a great cultivator, he didn't become arrogant at all. He still diligently explored the path of immortality. What is Tao? What is human? What is heaven and earth? Where does Tao come from? Where does human go? Where is the end of heaven and earth? Can insignificant human beings really have the power to change heaven and earth? And where does the gate of eternal life open? What is the path of immortality? To seek immortality, to explore the true meaning of the world. Countless people and countless things kept appearing in Emotienga's mind. Questions, doubts, and eventually calmness. The spiritual aura in the closed-door meditation room gradually stabilized. Outside the closed-door meditation room, she took a deep breath. Finally, she passed the first hurdle. He had failed to form his nascent soul 3 times, and every time, he failed at the first hurdle. This hurdle wasn't too dangerous, but it was a crucial hurdle on the way to the nascent soul realm. Only with a firm belief could she continue walking on the path of immortality. If she hesitated for even a moment, she wouldn't be able to move forward. After an unknown amount of time, Emotienga opened her eyes. She felt her heart was as calm as still water. And she took the medicinal pills she prepared one by one. After she took all the medicinal pills, a powerful spiritual aura burst out of her body. She didn't panic and slowly guided the spiritual aura to move in her body. Yin and Yang were Tai Chi, and the combination of the 5 elements was primal chaos. Everything in this world, as long as it was alive, couldn't escape from Yin, Yang, and the 5 elements. Mastering Yin, Yang, and the 5 elements meant mastering the world. Qin, she stood motionlessly outside the closed-door meditation room, feeling the fluctuating spiritual aura. This was the second hurdle of soul formation, and it was also the most dangerous hurdle. During this process, the body would absorb countless spiritual auras, and if the meridians and dantian could withstand the test, their gold core would shatter, and they would form their nascent soul. If their gold core shattered but couldn't withstand the test, they wouldn't be able to form their nascent soul. In that case, hundreds of years of cultivation would go down the drain. He waited quietly. If an accident happened, he would stop her, protect her gold core, and preserve her cultivation. Nascent soul could be tried again, but once her gold core shattered, everything would be irreparable, and she would have to start all over again. But what made him feel strange was that although everything in the closed-door meditation room was stable and countless spiritual auras were rushing into Emotienga's body, The moment her gold core shattered, and she would form her nascent soul didn't come. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, time passed quickly, and everything in the closed-door meditation room seemed to have stopped. This made Qin very puzzled, but he couldn't think of anything. During the soul formation process, if other people intervened, it could easily lead to a tragedy. Right now, aside from taking too long, everything was normal for Emotienga. If he rashly intervened, he might end up making a fool of himself. After all, when it came to soul formation, everyone had different experiences. His own soul formation process could only be used as a reference. There are also people who take more than 10 years to form their nascent soul. Maybe that's what happened to Emotienga. He could only guess like this. Inside the closed-door meditation room, Emotienga was already immersed in the cycle of yin and yang, and the alternation of the 5 elements. She had no idea that someone was restless outside. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, time didn't stop in the slightest. Chapter 501. Misty clouds and immortal qi lingered. Between the towering peaks, sword light flashed from time to time. Sometimes sword qi soared into the sky, and other times sword intent was threatening. This lasted for half a day. In midair, in the clouds, Jing Xingji casually withdrew his flying sword. He looked with satisfaction at the brilliant and incomparably sharp flying sword in his hand. This was the ownerless sword that he obtained from an ancient immortal mansion when he built his foundation. Until today, he still did not know what precious material this sword was made of. But after recognizing its master and nourishing it for more than 200 years, the sword was connected with his mind, sharper and sharper, and the sword intent was stronger and stronger. He still remembered that more than 200 years ago, when he obtained this sword, his master, who was still alive, said that this sword was as clear as autumn water and contained sword qi, so it was better to call it still water sword. In fact, although he seemed to be playing around with the world, he would rather break than bend, and was not suitable for this sword name at all. However, he understood what his master meant. He hoped that he would restrain his edge, so as not to provoke disaster. Unfortunately, at that time he was young and aggressive, and did not understand these things. Later he had no chance. After the death of his master, he endured for 100 years in the ancient sword sect, but in the end he could not endure it. The still water sword was called still water, but he had cultivated it into a sword of swift and fierce killing intent. But he did not regret it. What was the use of enduring? In this world, strength was everything. With strength, one could be above others. He did not have the opportunity of Qin Shoujing and Emo Qingwei. But in this immortal palace, he also obtained a lot of good things. Just high-grade spirit stones alone. After 20 years of unscrupulous cultivation, he still had tens of thousands of pieces, which was almost an unimaginable wealth outside. In the world of immortal cultivation, middle-grade and above spirit stones were rare. Even Yuanying stage cultivators, on weekdays, mostly used low-grade or middle-grade spirit stones to trade, and kept high-grade spirit stones for their own use. Ordinary Yuanying stage cultivators, most of their transactions were in the tens of thousands, and their total net worth was only 1 million or so. Tens of thousands of high-grade spirit stones were equivalent to hundreds of millions of low-grade spirit stones. This made him sigh. Ancient times were ancient times, and high-grade spirit stones were not valuable. Unfortunately, although this huge immortal palace was also made of high-grade spirit stones, there were restrictions. Otherwise, he really wanted to move a spirit stone house back. However, although high-grade spirit stones were rare, they could not be compared to crystal jades. He was not proficient in miscellaneous knowledge, so he gave up the materials in exchange for crystal jades. He used the secret method of sword cultivators to refine these crystal jades into the still water sword. After 20 years of nourishment, the still water sword, which was originally filled with killing intent, became even sharper. In his view, it was not inferior to the wind feather sword, the only cultivator of the ancient sword sect at the late Yuan stage, venerable swordsman Yuanying, who was known as the best sword in the world. Thinking of this, he could not help but look towards the northeast. There was also a lone peak there, quietly sitting in the corner of the immortal palace. Speaking of which, it was strange. It had been 20 years. What were Qin Shoujing and Imo Qingwei doing? Unexpectedly, he did not even take a step out of the cave. Even if he went to visit, he would just send his spirit beast to send him away. He knew that after leaving the underground palace, Missouri Qingwei would go into seclusion to form her nascent soul. But even so, it shouldn't be to the extent of not seeing her for 20 years, right? The little devil cultivator in the underground palace had already reached the peak stage of the core formation realm and was planning to enter secluded meditation to form his nascent soul. Besides, she was in seclusion, so why didn't Qin Shoujing go out? When it came to forming one's nascent soul, no one else could help. Could it be that they were having a good time here and forgot to go out? This thought suddenly popped up in Jing Xingji's mind, and then he felt that he was thinking too much. No matter how good this immortal palace was, it was useless if they couldn't get out. They would not be stupid. But why didn't they appear for 20 years? Did Imo Qingwei succeed in forming her nascent soul? With a stomach full of questions, he wanted to go to their cave to have a look. Even if he knew that the one who sent him away must be that spirit beast with eyes looking at the sky. After thinking about it for a while, Jing Xingji finally decided to go back to his cave to meditate. No matter what, improving his cultivation was the most practical thing. Turning around in midair, he was about to ride his sword back to the cave, when suddenly he stopped and turned his head again to look towards the northeast. "Spiritual light," he blurted out. He saw the cave in the northeast direction suddenly burst into a bright spiritual light, and countless spiritual qi rushed over there, converging into a little spiritual light, surrounding the entire cave. The celestial phenomenon of forming a nascent soul. When the auspicious clouds appeared and spiritual birds flew, Jing Xingji was certain. Joy appeared on his face. It seems that Imo Qingwei succeeded in forming her nascent soul. In this way, there were 3 nascent soul cultivators among them. In addition, Yang Qingji was close to forming his nascent soul, which was one step closer to their plan. But this scene only lasted for less than half an hour before it stopped. There was no sound of wind and thunder, and there was no follow-up celestial phenomenon. When the spiritual light dissipated, and everything returned to normal, Jing Xingji was confused again. What was going on? How could the celestial phenomenon of forming a nascent soul only reach this level? It should have lasted at least half a day. Did Imo Qingwei succeed in forming her nascent soul? If she didn't succeed, how could there be a celestial phenomenon? If she succeeded, how could the spiritual light dissipate so quickly? And even the most basic sound of wind and thunder didn't appear. It was said that in ancient times, when a cultivator formed his nascent soul, there would be a minor heavenly tribulation, because the nascent soul cultivator had already obtained the magical power to move mountains and seas, and entered the gate of immortality. Today, the minor heavenly tribulation no longer appeared, but the sound of wind and thunder was inevitable. This was the trace left by the minor heavenly tribulation, and it was also a symbol of the cultivator's great success in forming his nascent soul. He was full of doubts, and the flying sword under his feet turned and flew towards the northeast. *******, Imo Tienga opened her eyes. Her whole body felt comfortable and full of power. She gently waved her sleeves, and the spiritual aura around her surged. She stepped out of the closed-door meditation room. At first glance, she saw the person she expected, just like when he formed his nascent soul. Their eyes met. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "Finally." Imo Tienga smiled and naturally put her arms around his waist. He also reached out to hug her. After a long time, the two of them calmed down and walked out of the virtual sky world hand in hand. "What's going on? Why did it take 20 years? Qin, she asked. 20 years? Imo Tienga was surprised. You said I was in closed-door meditation for 20 years? Yes, if it weren't for the fact that your spiritual aura was very stable, I would have thought you had an accident. Imo Tienga was also puzzled. I just felt that the spiritual aura was very comfortable, and I didn't feel anything. Later, when my core broke and formed my nascent soul, it was also natural, and I didn't take the initiative to guide it. Really? Qin pressed her pulse and carefully felt it for a while. In the end, he said happily, "It seems to be a good thing. The spiritual aura in your whole body is very condensed. It doesn't look like you've just formed your nascent soul at all." Emotienga was relieved to hear what he said. Although she felt her nascent soul was very smooth, 20 years was indeed a bit abnormal. After all, she started to form her nascent soul as soon as she entered the closed-door meditation room. Unlike some cultivators who cultivated to a certain level before starting to form their nascent souls, the so-called closed-door meditation for dozens of years was actually only a few years. She recalled her experience of forming her nascent soul. She had smoothly passed the first mental trial. After taking the medicinal pill, she had been absorbing spiritual energy. This process wasn't something she had actively controlled, but it had happened naturally. At the last moment, when the conditions were right, her earth core shattered, and she became a nascent soul. The process of her core breaking was also very smooth, and she almost didn't feel any pain. Perhaps because her primordial spirit was strong enough, and she absorbed enough spiritual aura, she easily absorbed the power after her core broke, and formed her nascent soul. Finally, it was the real inner demon trial. It was different from the inner demon trial during core formation. During soul formation, one had to pass the first mental trial before they could enter the step of breaking their core to form their nascent soul. After forming their nascent soul, they still had to pass the real inner demon trial. The mental torture at the beginning tested the cultivator's heart towards Tao, and whether they had a firm belief in continuing to advance on the great Tao of the nascent soul realm. As long as there weren't any obvious flaws in their mental state, this trial wasn't difficult. However, the inner demon trial was much more terrifying. Any fears or expectations would appear in this trial. If they couldn't control themselves and got lost in the inner demon, all their efforts would be in vain. Fortunately, all these years, she never relaxed her mental training, so she didn't immerse herself in the inner demon for long. She easily got rid of it. After talking about herself, she began to ask about the outside world in the past 20 years. During these 20 years, Qin had been guarding the virtual sky world. At first, he felt strange and didn't dare to leave. Later, he found her condition stable, so he calmed down and paid attention to her condition while cultivating. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, he needed to adapt to his body and spiritual aura again. The 3 Yang Real Fire on the 3 Yang Real Fire sword had transformed into the more overbearing vermilion bird's flame. Even the extreme Yang Real Fire had been fused with the vermilion bird's breath. In his Dantian, the pure Yang spiritual aura and the vermilion bird's breath combined to form a new and powerful force. But because of this, he needed to refine the Yang spiritual bead again. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to control the vermilion bird bow that had been absorbed into the Yang spiritual bead. After 20 years of refining, he had regained control of the Yang spiritual bead. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before he could take out the vermilion bird bow. As for the spiritual beasts and the cave outside, there were no abnormalities. Just as Qin guessed, Xiaofan advanced to the 6th rank in the past 20 years. Xiaohuo was also almost there. Although the bright bird didn't advance, its strength also increased greatly. Sure enough, the blood-eating vine had a miraculous effect on spiritual beasts. Fei, who was left outside the virtual sky world, had also cultivated to the peak of the 5th rank. As for the cave, there weren't many people in this immortal palace, so there wouldn't be any accidents. At most, Jing Xingji would come to harass them. Speaking of Jing Xingji came outside. Qin Shoujing, Emo Qingwei, you should come out of your closed-door meditation now, right? He didn't send them a summoning talisman. Instead, he shouted at the entrance of the cave. Emo Tienga and Qin smiled at each other, then stood up and opened the restriction on the cave. Upon seeing them, Jing Xingji immediately withdrew his flying sword and rushed inside. Did you advance to the nascent soul realm or not? He asked. He quickly scanned Emo Tienga from top to bottom. Upon discovering that she had indeed become a nascent soul cultivator, his expression became strange. Did you pass the inner demon's trial? Are there any problems? Emotinga didn't understand why he looked like this. Otherwise, how could I still be standing here? Fellow Taoist Jing, what are you doing? Jing Xingji rubbed his nose and said, I saw the celestial phenomenon of your nascent soul formation outside, but there was no sound of wind or thunder, and the spiritual light dispersed very quickly. I thought you advanced to the nascent soul realm, but didn't pass the inner demon's trial. He then muttered to himself, It's strange. Since you advanced to the nascent soul realm smoothly, why is the celestial phenomenon only half complete? Chapter 502. Only half of the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. Emotinga and Qin, she looked at each other with confusion on their faces. Neither of them had thought about the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. Emotinga had the experience of forming her gold core in the virtual sky world, and Qin she also formed his nascent soul there. The virtual sky world was a closed space that couldn't attract the spiritual aura of heaven and earth, so it was impossible for celestial phenomena to occur inside. As for the outside world, the immortal palace was torn open, so it was also a closed space. They also didn't expect celestial phenomena to occur. What happened? Qin she asked. Jing Xingji said, You don't know? Just now, there was a spiritual light around your cave, so I knew you should have come out. But the sound of wind and thunder didn't appear, and the spiritual light dispersed. The whole process took less than an hour. It was indeed only an hour, since they came out of the virtual sky world. Seeing that the two of them were deep in thought, Jing Xingji couldn't help but ask, What's going on? Tell me. Qin she asked, Tell me, why did the nascent soul celestial phenomenon appear? Of course it's because of advancing to the nascent soul realm, and using one's own strength to trigger the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. Jing Xingji answered halfway and paused, seeming to have understood something. You also realized it, right? Spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How much spiritual aura can there be in a closed space? How could it trigger the nascent soul celestial phenomenon? Jing Xingji was silent, thinking about what Emotinga said. It was common knowledge in the cultivation world that celestial phenomena would occur when a cultivator advanced to the gold core realm. It was also known why celestial phenomena were born. When a cultivator advanced to the gold core realm, heaven and earth sensed the cultivator's powerful strength, triggering the fluctuation of spiritual aura, and thus celestial phenomena. For cultivators, the so-called spiritual aura of heaven and earth was the spiritual aura existing between heaven and earth. This kind of spiritual aura was different from the spiritual aura produced by spirit veins. It was the original primordial energy existing between heaven and earth. Therefore, even in places without spirit veins, cultivators could still cultivate. This was a problem for an enclosed space. Without spirit veins, there wouldn't be too much spiritual aura. In other words, the spiritual aura of heaven and earth was too little to trigger celestial phenomena. I see. Jing Xingji understood. The spiritual aura of heaven and earth in this immortal palace wasn't enough to trigger the nascent soul celestial phenomenon. So the spiritual light dispersed so quickly? Not only that. Qin she said, What I also want to say is, how big is the entire immortal palace? Excluding the spiritual aura produced by the spirit veins, and these high-grade spirit stones, how much spiritual aura can there be? Even a half-completed celestial phenomenon ascendant wouldn't be able to withstand it, right? This, Jing Xingji reacted quickly and immediately said, You're saying that this immortal palace isn't sealed? Or should I say, it's not fully enclosed? Qin she nodded. You're right. If half of the celestial phenomenon really appeared, it means there's a lot of spiritual aura there. At the very least, it should include the spiritual aura on the spiritual mountain outside. The meaning of these words Jing Xingji was all too clear. If the barrier between the mystical palace and the mystical mountain was cracked to begin with, it would be much easier for them to destroy the barrier. The entrance that connected Spirited Mountain to the outside world was created by the 5 saints, using the space-tearing technique from the immortal palace. It was very stable, and could be used to exit directly. If I can find the crack in the restriction between the immortal palace and the Spirited Mountain, Mo Tiange looked at the delighted Jing Xingji and said, "Fellow Taoist Jing, don't be too happy too early. The restrictions in this immortal palace are far beyond our realm. Besides, the immortal palace is so big. How could it be easy to find the crack?" Jing Xingji waved his hand indifferently and said, "You're right, but there's more hope than before, isn't there? That's a good thing." "Alright, you're right. If they could really find the crack in the space, the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation would have a higher chance of success." The three of them talked for a while more before Jing Xingji took his leave. The restrictions in the immortal palace were so brilliant that finding the crack wasn't something that could be done overnight. Soon after, Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji went back to the underground palace to see Yang Qingji. Yang Qingji was very happy to see her successfully advancing to the nascent soul realm. The four of them were now grasshoppers on a rope. Mo Tiange successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, which meant she was one step closer to their goal. However, this also urged him to seize the time. Only 3 nascent soul cultivators weren't enough. Using the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation required 5 mediums. Him advancing to the nascent soul realm was just one more, so he had to think of another way. After leaving the underground palace, the two of them were about to return to their immortal's cave when Feifei, who had been crouching on Mo Tiange's shoulder, said, "Wait, I'll take you to a place." "Huh? What place? Could there be a good place in this immortal palace that Feifei took a fancy to?" "Just follow me," Feifei said. Jumped down from Mo Tiange's shoulder, turned around and ran. The two of them glanced at each other then followed. Feifei was very sensitive to the aura of spiritual treasures, so it must have found some kind of treasure. After Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil art, the aura of the primordial devil in the immortal palace basically disappeared, and the deification refined corpses were trapped in the valley. Now, there were only some refined corpses and demonic beasts with low cultivation levels in this immortal palace, so the danger was greatly reduced. Although Feifei was a spiritual beast and didn't have any offensive spells, it was very brave. Presumably, in the past 20 years, it had searched every corner of the immortal palace. 2 people and 1 beast went further and further away from the buildings of the immortal palace, deep into the back mountain. This immortal palace occupied a very vast area, even including part of the mountain range. Back then, Fu Yaozi said that the depths of the back mountain was the real interior of the immortal palace. From what he saw, it might be the location of the immortal's cave of the cultivator, with the highest cultivation level in this ice palace. However, he and the other 4 people couldn't enter, because of time constraints and their low cultivation levels. When she entered the immortal palace that year, Mo Tiange didn't think about entering the back mountain. They also didn't have much time, and their divine abilities and wisdom were inferior to the 5 saints, so it would be a waste of time to come. Later, when she was trapped in the immortal palace, leaving the immortal palace became her biggest goal, so she naturally didn't think about it. Since even Fu Yaozi didn't recommend her to come and explore, it meant that the possibility of her entering was almost zero, so why should she waste time? Besides, she had already obtained great benefits from the immortal palace, so being too greedy wasn't a good thing. She followed Feifei until they reached a dense forest. She saw Feifei darting in and out of the forest, seemingly following some kind of pattern. The more Mo Tiange followed, the more baffled she became. In the end, she suddenly remembered something. "Is this a formation?" Feifei stopped and turned to look at her. "Your reaction isn't slow at all." Ignoring its tone, Mo Tiange asked, "What's going on?" "This formation is very clever. I can't see any clues at all. How did you know how to break it?" "This isn't the way to break it," Feifei said. "This is the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation that was widely spread in the distant past era. This formation doesn't have any lethality, and it's mainly used to prevent others from entering. As long as you understand the footwork, you can enter. This formation is a simplified version of the 9 Palaces 8 trigrams formation. Presumably, many of its mysteries have been lost since the distant past era." "I see." She felt strange. Feifei had no interest in formations, so how could it suddenly understand ancient formations? "Then, do you know how to break it?" Feifei glanced at her. I know how to walk. I don't know how to set it up. As they spoke, their vision suddenly brightened. They were already out of the dense forest. This is... Upon seeing the scene in front of them, both Emotienga and Qin were dumbfounded. In front of them was a small valley with luxuriant grass, strange rocks, waterfalls, and clear blue pond water. In terms of scenery, this small valley could be regarded as quiet and elegant. It was an excellent place to stay. However, no matter how beautiful the scenery was, it was nothing in the cultivation world. Their cultivation group's encampment was a celestial mountain, and there were many places with beautiful scenery. However, there was an extremely clever blocking formation outside this small valley, and Feifei was so cautious. Could it be that there was something special about this place? With this thought in mind, the two of them glanced at the scenery in front of them one by one. After looking for a long time, they didn't find anything unusual. The spiritual aura was quite dense, but it was only a little bit denser than the immortal palace outside. It was nothing compared to the virtual sky world. There were also some spiritual plants, but they weren't any special species. Moreover, there didn't seem to be any mineral deposits. After looking for a long time, Emotienga was still very confused, so she asked directly, Feifei, why did you bring us here? Are there any treasures here? Feifei was squatting by the pond to wash its claws. After it finished washing, it began to comb its golden fur. The treasures are right in front of us, it said lazily. Right in front of us? Qinshi's eyes moved. He suddenly approached the pond and squatted down. Could it be this water? Feifei rolled on a big rock by the pond. You have a good eye. It was obviously a compliment, but when it came out of its mouth, it felt awkward. However, the two of them were used to it, so they both ignored its tone. Emotienga walked closer, scooped up a handful of water, and looked at it carefully for a while. She felt it was no different from ordinary spiritual water, and the spiritual aura inside was very weak, not even comparable to the famous spiritual springs in the celestial pole. As for what was special, it seemed to be very clean, so clean that there were almost no impurities, which was very rare in spiritual springs. This is spirit tempering water. Feifei didn't let them be confused for too long. It's the cleanest water in the world. It can wash away all impurities. Emotienga was a little surprised. She once wanted to get rid of the remaining devil aura on the Fuxing sword, but she couldn't find a suitable method. Feifei told her there used to be a kind of treasure in this world called spirit tempering water, which was the nemesis of devil aura. Unfortunately, this thing had long disappeared from the world, and she couldn't find any clues to find it. Later, Fu Yaozi woke up. He wasn't afraid of the devil aura on the Fuxing sword at all, so Emotienga didn't worry about it anymore. She didn't expect to see spirit tempering water here. Whether it's concocting pills or refining tools, adding spirit tempering water can greatly improve the success rate. If you can refine it into a magic weapon, it'll be even better. This thing is the nemesis of devil aura, so it'll be very easy to deal with devil cultivators. Emotienga finally understood. No wonder there was a strange formation outside this valley. It turned out there was such a treasure inside. During the war between the righteous and the devil, this spirit tempering water showed its effect. Without hesitation, she took out the Fuxing sword from her Qianquan ring and dipped the sword into the pond. With a chi sound, the Fuxing sword emitted a light smoke, and the devil aura attached to the sword dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 503. Without the devil aura, the Fuxing sword was still simple and heavy. Its aura was heavy, but the body of the sword was cold. The power of wind and thunder inside was even more intense, almost breaking out of the sword. Qinshi was surprised. This sword has the thunder attribute? The previous Fuxing sword had momentum, but it was hidden. Only after the devil aura was removed did he realize the sword was made of good thunder attribute materials. Treasures of the thunder attribute were not common in the world of cultivators. Firstly, there were very few people with thunder spiritual roots, so it was more suitable for people with gold spiritual roots to practice gold cultivation techniques. Secondly, treasures of the thunder attribute were very powerful. However, because of this, their progress was very slow, so very few people chose them. Emotianga didn't expect the Fuxing sword to be a rare thunder attribute magic weapon. Emotianga knew about it, but she didn't care because she couldn't remove the devil aura before. After she advanced to the nascent soul realm, she had to refine many magic weapons again to display the strength of a nascent soul cultivator. Now that she removed the devil aura from the Fuxing sword, she obtained a powerful magic weapon. She said happily, "Master Fu Yao said this sword isn't his natal magic weapon, but he spent a lot of effort to collect materials to make it. There are pure thunder crystals inside, and if it's used with thunder attribute spells, it'll be very powerful. Oh, in that case, it complements the Great Heavenly Thunder technique." They happened to take a Great Heavenly Thunder technique from the storeroom. The reason why he chose this cultivation technique was because he took into consideration Emotianga's lack of Thunderbolt Strike, which could make up for her lack of attack power. The Fuxing sword was also of the lightning attribute, so it just so happened to be of the lightning attribute. Yes, looking at the new Fuxing sword, Emotianga couldn't bear to put it down. After playing with it for a while, she put it away and asked Feifei, "Feifei, why is there so much spirit tempering water? Besides, this pool doesn't seem to be stagnant. Is it inexhaustible?" Feifei said, "Spirit tempering water needs a lot to be effective. Whether it's concocting pills or refining tools, you need to add a whole bottle, unlike some spiritual waters that only need 1 or 2 drops. As for how this water is produced, just like spirit veins have spiritual eyes, spirit tempering water also has a source." Hearing this, Emotianga and Qinshi looked at each other and asked, "What about the source?" The source of the spirit tempering water is usually in the shape of jade or stone. It is called the spirit tempering jade or spirit tempering stone. No one knows how they are produced. Bury it somewhere, and the spirit quenching water will be produced slowly. Fei leaped onto her shoulder. "Hurry up and let Xiaofan out. Let it look for it." It was so easy to order others around. Nevertheless, Emotianga still listened to it. She entered the virtual sky world and took Xiaofan out, letting it go into the water to look for spirit tempering jades or spirit tempering stones. Lil Fan was a sea beast, and it was very agile underwater. Let it find the most suitable one. Not long after they entered the water, Xiaofan floated up from the bottom of the pond with a glowing jade in its mouth. Xiaofan handed it to Emotianga and asked, "Master, is this it?" Emotianga took the jade stone. It was about the size of a palm, and there were faint vein patterns on its surface. If she hadn't known about it beforehand, she wouldn't have been able to tell it was a treasure that could produce spirit tempering water. "That's it," Feifei urged. "Put it in the virtual sky world." The 2 people and 2 beasts entered the virtual sky world. Emotianga asked the puppets to dig a pond by the stream and buried the spirit tempering jade in it. After thinking for a while, she went out to take some spirit tempering water from the pond and put it in her Qianquan ring. Even if they had spirit tempering jade, it would take some time to produce spirit tempering water, so they took some as a backup first. After doing all this, Feifei led the way. The 2 of them left the 9 palaces 8 trigrams formation and went back to the cave. ******, they had spent more than 20 years in this immortal palace, so they couldn't delay the matter of getting out. It wasn't just the 2 of them who thought so. Jing Xingji also thought so. He had a big grudge, so how could he be willing to be trapped in this immortal palace for the rest of his life? Emotianga also had things to do in the outside world. Now that time was tight, they couldn't delay it any longer. "Fellow Taoist Qingwei, how long will it take to comprehend your Xuanxu cloud connecting formation?" Jing Xingji asked. Emotianga pondered for a while. "This is hard to say. In my estimation, 1 or 2 years is the shortest, but maybe 3 or 5 years. After all, the Xuanxu cloud connecting formation involved a very complicated space-tearing technique, so it definitely wouldn't take a few years to completely master it. However, they didn't need to pay too much attention to using this formation to open a passage. They just needed to figure out how to use it. 3 or 5 years. All right, let's count as long as it takes." Jing Xingji thought for a while. To activate the Swanshu cloud connecting formation, we need 5 nascent soul cultivators, or above as mediators, right? Correct. Perhaps we can improve other aspects, but this is the principle of this formation. In fact, it didn't matter what cultivation level the mediators were, but to activate this formation, it needed too much spiritual aura. 5 nascent soul cultivators, or above would barely be enough, Jing Xingji said. Then here comes the problem. Right now there are only 4 living people in this immortal palace. The 3 of us are already in the nascent soul realm, and that devil cultivator boy will soon enter closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. He cultivates a top-notch devil technique, so he seems very confident in forming his nascent soul. Let's assume he can successfully form his nascent soul in 3 or 5 years, but that's only 4 nascent soul cultivators. There's still 1 left. What should we do? There are 2 ways, Qinshi said thoughtfully. The first is to find a nascent soul substitute. The second is to find a crack in the restriction between the immortal palace and the spiritual mountain. Maybe the 4 of us can break the restriction. Emotinga agreed. Emotinga expressed her approval. Both methods are feasible. The first method was needless to say. It was the safest solution. As for the second method, they only needed to put a puppet in the position of the 5th medium. Breaking the restriction would be done by the 4 of them, but it depended on how big the crack in the restriction was. If it was too small, it would be in vain. Then let's talk about it one by one. The first is to find a nascent soul substitute. In this immortal palace, there are things related to the cultivation realm. Aside from us, there are only spiritual beasts and puppets. Speaking of spiritual beasts, I know your bird is already in the 7th rank, but it won't be easy for it to advance to the 8th rank, right? Qinshi smiled bitterly. It's not easy for spiritual beasts to advance to the 8th rank. It won't take long even if it takes 100 years to advance from the 7th rank to the 8th rank. It'll take at least 30 to 50 years for my bright bird to advance. 30 to 50 years? Can you wait that long? I can't wait that long. Emotinga shook her head decisively. I have something to do outside. If I wait 30 to 50 years, I don't know if I can finish it. Time is tight. I can only wait 20 years at most. We must go out within 20 years. Jing Xingji didn't ask much about the specifics. He said, since spiritual beasts won't work, we can only consider puppets. Fellow Taoist Qingwei, can you make nascent soul puppets now? Emotinga shook her head. I can't now, but it's not impossible. She still had the jade bone puppet technique in her hands, and she also had the main materials. However, this technique was very difficult, and she still lacked other materials, so she couldn't guarantee she could make it. In other words, this method can only be used as a backup. Emotinga nodded to show her agreement. Jing Xingji sighed. Then let's consider the second method. We'll look for the crack in the restriction between the immortal palace and the spiritual mountain. How confident are you? Emotinga and Qinshi glanced at each other. Their expressions were a bit solemn. After thinking for a while, Qinshi said, the immortal palace is so big. It won't be easy to find a crack in the restriction that might be very small. Not to mention the restriction is so brilliant that we might not be able to find it with our eyesight. Even if we can find it, I'm afraid it'll take a lot of time. I think so too. Jing Xingji was a bit dejected. Sometimes when I think about it, I feel a bit regretful. Why don't I have any interest in miscellaneous knowledge? If I knew 1 or 2 things, I wouldn't be so helpless. Judging from his appearance, he must have thought a lot these days. With his personality, it was already good that he could endure being trapped in the immortal palace for more than 20 years. Let's do it this way, Qinshi said while thinking. Neither of these 2 methods is foolproof, but they both have hope. We'd better do it separately. We have to look for the crack in the immortal palace's restriction. Tinga, you should also study it and see if you can make nascent soul puppets. These 2 methods didn't conflict, so there wouldn't be any problem if they were carried out at the same time. Alright, if we want to get out, there are a few things we have to do. The first is to study the mysterious void cloud connecting formation. The second is to make nascent soul puppets. The third is to find the crack in the Immortal Palace's restriction. If we choose one of the two, we'll have hope of getting out. There's one more thing. Fellow Taoist Yang has to advance to the nascent soul realm smoothly, Jing Xingji added. Otherwise, even if we manage to do it, we still won't be able to get out. Mo Tinga said. Primordial devil art isn't an ordinary devil art. Yang Qingji also absorbed a lot of primordial devil aura, so I think it's very likely that he'll succeed in forming his nascent soul. All right. Jing Xingji no longer doubted her. In any case, we can't interfere with soul formation, so we'll trust him for the time being. It'll take at least 3 to 5 years for fellow Taoist Yang to form his nascent soul. During this time, we can't just sit around and do nothing. Qingxi brought the topic back. As I said just now, there are 3 things we have to do. The first 2 can only be left to Tiange, but the third, fellow Taoist Jing, this is our problem. It's not a problem for me to help, Jing Xingji said. The problem is that I'm not proficient in restrictions. I'm afraid I won't be able to find it even if I find it. This isn't a difficult problem, Mo Tiange interrupted. I have a magic weapon here called the sensing bell. It's very sensitive to fluctuations and restrictions. Senior Marshal brother, you can refine another one. The 2 of you can take one with you. Concocting pills and refining tools were Qingxi's strengths. Since he had the refining method, he could refine it as long as he didn't lack materials. Thus, the 3 of them reached an agreement. Among the 4 people in Immortal Palace, Yang Qingji only needed to focus on his closed-door meditation to form his nascent soul. If he successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm, it wouldn't be too late for him to join them. Mo Tinga's first task was to study the mysterious cloud-connecting formation. In her spare time, she would see if she could refine nascent soul puppets. Qingxi first refined the sensing bell. Then he and Jing Xingji went to look for cracks in the restrictions around Immortal Palace. With this kind of division of labor, in 3 to 5 years, they would have some progress in leaving Immortal Palace. Having come to a conclusion, Jing Xingji left with satisfaction. Next, they had to take action to leave Immortal Palace. As she watched Jing Xingji's departing figure, Mo Tiange suddenly said, Say, what if the cracks in the restrictions are near the refined corpses? Qingxi was dumbfounded. He didn't know how to answer. Chapter 504. Mo Tiange stood in midair, looking down at the Immortal Palace shrouded in immortal aura. In this independent space, there was no sunrise or sunset. There was only misty white light. Although it was filled with immortal aura, and was as beautiful as a fairyland, it was like a dream, unreal and unreal. In the blink of an eye, she had been here for almost 30 years. She couldn't remember the feeling of sunlight anymore. Sometimes, she vaguely felt that the mountain breeze, the sea waves, the blue sky, and the bright sunshine were all dreams. If she went on like this, she almost suspected that she would forget the outside world. However, these days were coming to an end soon. She smiled faintly and turned her head. She saw a red light rising from the lonely peak below, and approaching her. In the blink of an eye, the red light was already in front of her. What's wrong? Qingxi asked her. Mo Tiange shook her head. Nothing. Let's go. Seeing that she didn't look worried, Qingxi didn't ask any more questions. The 2 of them turned around and flew side by side towards the underground palace. Their speed wasn't fast. Although they had explored every possible place these years, there were still drifting restrictions in this immortal palace. It wouldn't be good if they ran into them. When they arrived at the entrance of the underground palace, they walked along the tunnel until they stopped in front of a cave filled with devil aura. Yang Qingji and Jing Xingji were already inside the cave. The devil aura on Yang Qingji's body was faint, but the spiritual aura pressure was extremely heavy. He had successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. You're finally here. Jing Xingji was in high spirits. I thought you were having fun here and didn't want to leave. Qingxi glanced at him faintly and said, Unlike you, I didn't have the chance to have fun even if I wanted to. Seeing that Jing Xingji's face turned green, Mo Tiange said in time, Fellow Taoists, are you ready? Being dragged back to the main topic, Jing Xingji and Yang Qingji both answered, Of course. Emotianga looked at Qinshi. Qinshi said, let's set the formation. She nodded, took out magic weapons, formation flags, spirit stones, and other things from her Qianquan ring, and began to set the formation in the cave. It had been 5 years since she successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm. During these 5 years, everything went smoothly. Yang Qingji went into seclusion to form his nascent soul. When he came out of seclusion on the 3rd year, he successfully advanced to the nascent soul realm and joined their ranks. Her study of the Xuanxu cloud linking formation was unexpectedly smooth. Perhaps it was because she had advanced to the nascent soul realm. Many things that she couldn't understand before were easily solved. By the time Yang Qingji came out of his closed-door meditation, he had already understood the formation. Qin Shi, Jing Xingji and later Yang Qingji. The 3 of them worked together and spent several years before they finally found the crack in the restriction between the Immortal Palace and the Spiritual Mountain. The result was unexpected. The crack was actually where the primordial devil steel was, which was also the cave where Yang Qingji previously performed closed-door meditation. In hindsight, it was only natural. The leakage of primordial devil qi was not only in the Immortal Palace, but also in the Spirited Mountain. There must be a crack in the restriction between the underground palace and the outside world. The only thing that wasn't going well was the jade bone puppet technique. Except for the introductory mechanism book she found in the Qianquan ring of the deification ancient cultivator, Emotianga didn't have any other books related to mechanisms, so she could only explore it by herself. However, since the jade bone puppet technique was a treasure in the storehouse, how could it be so easy to figure out? As for the missing materials, she mobilized her 3 spiritual beasts and Qin Shi's bright bird to search everywhere in the Immortal Palace before she finally managed to gather them. After countless experiments, she finally made some headway, but the so-called deification realm couldn't be reached. For this reason, they spent a lot of effort to enter the scripture depository and obtain some ancient books before they finally succeeded in making this jade bone puppet. However, this puppet couldn't reach the deification realm. It was only in the nascent soul realm. This was something they couldn't do anything about. No matter how talented he was, he couldn't reach the Great Master realm in just a few years. Moreover, according to the ancient books they found, mechanisms couldn't be used casually. If the cultivator didn't have enough cultivation level, some refining methods couldn't be used, so it was almost impossible for a nascent soul cultivator to make a puppet in the deification realm. After finding this point, Emotianga felt relieved. For now, if they wanted to go out, the nascent soul puppet was enough. As for the deification puppet, it wouldn't be too late to refine it again when her cultivation level and attainments in the art of mechanisms were high enough. Yang Qingji had already put away the primal devil stone tablet. Emotianga used spirit stone powder to draw the embryonic form of the entire cloudlink formation in the cave. She then ordered the 3 of them to lay the formation together. The cloudlink formation this time was much more complicated than the one they came in with. First of all, they didn't have a holy object with the power of the 5 saints sealed inside, so they needed a lot of spiritual aura. Second, Emotianga made some changes to the cloudlink formation, so the passage she created should be much safer than when they came in. However, this also increased the complexity of the formation. As the formation flags fell one after another, a complete star atlas gradually appeared on the ground. Finally, she inserted the high-grade spirit stones one by one. The formation suddenly shone with a white light, and the entire star atlas seemed to have come alive. It was like a real starry sky with twinkling stars and vibrant colors. Compared to the one they came in with before, this one was many times more exquisite. Emotianga straightened up and heaved a sigh of relief. The cloudlink formation was finally laid. "Everyone stand in your positions," she said. Without needing any instructions, the other 3 people each stood in a corner of the star atlas. Emotianga placed the jade bone puppet in the last position. This puppet was made from the crystal skeleton of a deification cultivator, who cultivated the ice heart jade bone technique, the nephrite holy spirit jade as its skin, and many other rare materials that only appeared in legends. The puppet was lifelike and extremely agile. Emotienga even dressed it in Han Ice Palace's uniform. At first glance, it looked no different from a living person. The four of them had long understood the incantation to activate the Cloudlink formation. At this moment, all of their expressions were solemn. They had been trapped in the Immortal Palace for 30 years. Whether they could leave or not depended on this time. The four of them, together with the Jadebone puppet, began to chant the incantation. The 5 corners under their feet shone brighter and brighter, and the spiritual aura produced by the high-grade spirit stones crazily rushed to where they stood. "Open!" Emotienga shouted. Without hesitation, everyone poured their spiritual aura into the star atlas under their feet. This process lasted for a long time. The star atlas was like an insatiable taotai, swallowing their spiritual aura in big gulps. The Jadebone puppet couldn't hold on anymore. Emotienga pressed her Qingquan ring, and several crystal jades appeared in her hand. She quickly stuffed them into the puppet's hand. She and Yang Qingji had just advanced to the nascent soul realm, so they didn't have enough spiritual aura. But they were prepared, so they swallowed medicinal pills and used crystal jades to replenish their spiritual aura. Jingxingji was next. Although he advanced to the nascent soul realm a long time ago, he was a sword cultivator, and this wasn't his specialty. Qingxi was the only one who wasn't affected. He had refined the Yang spiritual bead all these years. The Yang spiritual bead had endless spiritual aura, so it would automatically replenish his spiritual aura whenever he lacked spiritual aura. Just when Emotienga and Yang Qingji almost couldn't hold on any longer, with a buzzing sound, a ray of white light covered the entire star chart. This mysterious cloud-connecting formation, which had absorbed enough spiritual aura, emitted a sparkling light. Then, a dark hole appeared in the center of the star atlas. Success! Upon seeing this hole, Emotienga's body went limp, and she almost fell to the ground. The spiritual aura in her body had been sucked dry. If she hadn't obtained a lot of crystal jades in the Immortal Palace, and had the support of high-quality panaceas, the spiritual aura in her body wouldn't have been enough to activate this formation, even if she advanced to the nascent soul realm. Yang Qingji and Jingxingji weren't much better. Even the Jadebone puppet lost its luster. Looking at this dark hole, the four of them looked at each other, and couldn't help but smile. 30 years. Almost 30 years. They finally found the way out. The hard work of these 30 years wasn't in vain. Quickly meditate to restore your spiritual aura, Qingxi reminded them first. We can't say for sure how long this passage can last. Upon hearing this, the other people's expressions became serious. Without delay, they sat down cross-legged to adjust their breaths. If it was before, this kind of situation would absolutely not happen. Not to mention Jingxingji, Yang Qingji was very vigilant. How could he adjust his breath without any precaution under other people's eyes? But this time, they were trapped in the Immortal Palace together, and only found the way out after 30 years. They all felt sympathy for each other after going through trials and tribulations together, and they also trusted each other a little more. Holding the crystal jades, Emotienga operated the origin in her dantian with all her strength, and quickly recovered her spiritual aura. Then, she replaced the crystal jades that had exhausted their spiritual aura in the Jadebone puppet. She put the old ones into her bag, and inserted the new ones into the puppet. The puppet immediately regained its momentum. This was the advantage of the puppet. If its spiritual aura was exhausted, it could immediately return to its peak state after replacing the crystal jades. These crystal jades could automatically restore spiritual aura, and were inexhaustible. Before long, Jingxingji and Yang Qingji also recovered their spiritual aura and stood up. Who's going first? Jingxingji looked at Yang Qingji, then at them. Yang Qingji was about to take a step forward, but Emotienga said, "Let the puppet go first." The three of them thought this was a good idea. The puppet could be repaired if it was broken, and it could explore the way in front. Qingxi said, "Okay, you drive the puppet first. I'll go with you." Emotienga nodded. She took one last look at the cave, and didn't waste any more time. She drove the puppet into the cave, then went inside side by side with Jingxingji. After they went inside, Jing Xingji glanced at Yang Qingji and said, "Fellow Taoist Yang, please go first." His attitude towards Yang Qingji couldn't be said to be contemptuous or warm, but it definitely wasn't as casual as when he faced Yang Qingji and Mo Tiange. Yang Qingji smiled and didn't say anything.